Hey guys, tonight we're traveling down the Nile at sunset, drifting into the steamy haze of an ancient Egyptian party, a real one, where your linen robe clings just a bit too tightly in the heat. The air smells like crushed lotus and simmering goat stew, and someone's cousin is already 5 cups of pomegranate wine, deep and shouting poetry at a goat. You're here not as a pharaoh, not even as a priest, just an ordinary guest. Eyelids heavy from a long week of hauling amphorae, your feet dusty. But tonight, they've given you sandals, real leather. You step into the courtyard, and you're hit with a cloud of cinnamon smoke and roasted duck, laughter ricocheting off whitewashed walls. Someone's playing a double reed flute with far too much enthusiasm. Somewhere, someone is definitely flirting with someone else's wife. And you're just trying to find a cushion that doesn't smell like last week's beer. This is the erotic etiquette of the ancient Egyptian party, and you probably won't survive it. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is, just so I know if you're also wearing a party wig made of beeswax. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You walk past the threshold, and the temperature shifts ever so slightly. Cool stone under your feet, soft lamplight flickering across painted columns. Incense curls upward from bronze braziers, in rhythm with the drum beats. This isn't just any evening. This is a night where eroticism isn't hidden. It's perfumed, painted, and poured into every goblet. You're handed one now, a wine cup so cold with condensation it practically weeps. You drink, and the taste is shockingly sweet dates. Honey, maybe a trace of something else. Mandrake root. It's not out of the question. Historians still argue whether these parties were merely luxurious or deliberately hedonistic. But you suspect the answer is yes. Around you, the crowd thickens with the hum of practiced leisure. The women are oiled and shimmering, robes sheer enough to signal intention but thick enough to maintain plausible deniability. The men. Some are trying to recite verses. Others are simply trying not to spill their drinks. There's a hierarchy. Of course, nobles recline on cushions. Artisans hover near the food. And at least one teenager is pretending not to ogle the lute player. And the party. It's curated chaos. A very specific rhythm of decadence, where to appear too eager is bad taste, but too aloof, and you'll be mistaken for someone's bored uncle. You move toward the food table, where eroticism has marinated overnight. Honeyed lotus roots, figs sliced open just so, and flatbread warm as a lover's sigh. And this is where the weird detail hits you. The bread's been shaped like a certain body part. Not subtle, not accidental. Welcome to Egypt. Food here isn't just nourishment. It's innuendo on a ceramic platter. One preserved love poem describes sharing beer and onions with someone's wife as more satisfying than the breath of Ra himself. Another mentions the moistness of your mouth is like the pomegranate I peeled for you. Sexy, sort of. Specific, absolutely. In a shadowy corner, a dancer begins her slow, hypnotic spin. Her arms rise like reeds in floodwater, and her dress sways a beat behind her hips. The music hushes, not because anyone asks, but because the air itself thickens. A man with eyeliner sharper than your best dagger mutters something about divine movement. And honestly, he might be right. You feel the tension shift. This isn't a performance, it's a provocation. Still, it's all polite. Erotic etiquette demands patience. You watch without staring. You sip without slurping. You flirt without following her to the guest latrine. That comes later, if at all. There's a story passed around in whispers about a banquet held by a nobleman, whose name no one remembers, just the details. His wife wore a necklace of gold flies, symbolic of persistence, and offered figs to each guest from her own fingers. One guest, an ambitious baker's apprentice, bit her thumb by accident or on purpose, and the scandal that followed was so artfully covered up that it only survived through rumors carved in the margins of a temple ledger. Sex with Kings by Eleanor Herman suggests these moments weren't mistakes, but tools, rituals in a power game, played under flickering oil lamps. You catch a glimpse of one such moment now, a hand brushed too long across a shoulder. Laughter that spills into a silence, just a beat too late. You're watching people who've mastered the art of restrained desire, who know that the slow pour of wine can say more than any love poem, and the silence that follows a good joke. That's the window. Slip in your compliment. Not too forward. Maybe about their perfume, which smells faintly of henna and old money. They smile. You're in, and yet, all of this unfolds under watchful eyes of statues of gods perched in the niches. Hathor, goddess of love, music, and tipsy mistakes. Smiles, stone-faced, while guests offer her sips of beer and private thoughts. She watches dancers bare their shoulders and priests pretend not to notice. She knows exactly how many people will leave this party, hand in hand. Beside her, Bastet the cat goddess lounges in stone silence, probably judging you. Erotic etiquette, you realize, isn't about suppression. It's about sacred timing. A priest passes, flicking droplets of wine from his fingers as a blessing. Or maybe a joke. Historians still argue whether this gesture was religious or recreational, but it definitely hits your forehead with divine precision. You bless him back, then turn to the courtyard again. The night is full, now saturated with scent, shadow, and sound. The wine is stronger than you thought. Someone's telling a story about a stolen sandal and a mistaken identity that somehow ends in a marriage. Someone else is snoring, face first into a bowl of lentils. You take another sip and smile. You're finally at ease, floating between desire and dreams. Not yet asleep, but almost weightless. You shuffle deeper into the garden courtyard now, barefoot and buzzing. The wine's doing what it does best, lowering inhibitions, just enough that everyone's voice has softened by half an octave. And the boundary between modesty and mischief is a translucent veil. You pause near the lily pool, where moonlight skips lazily across the water. And someone has, for reasons no one questions, released a few sacred ibises into the party. They honk gently, inoffensively. A woman nearby tells you they're good luck, especially if they stare at you for longer than 6 seconds. One definitely is. You nod solemnly, as if this explains everything. In ancient Egypt, dressing for a party wasn't just about looking attractive. It was an entire erotic system coded in fabric, jewelry, scent, and the daring placement of body oil. Tonight, you've outdone yourself. Your sheer linen tunic has been freshly bleached, your nipples respectfully visible but not scandalously so. You've oiled your arms with myrrh. You've tied your hair back with a reed fiber ribbon. You may be a nobody on the street, but here, under torchlight, you look like you might know someone who once saw a vizier in traffic. Others have gone further. You spot a woman wearing nothing but a collar necklace and a strategically pleated skirt that defies gravity. Her eyeliner wing could slice papyrus. Her head is adorned with a wax perfume cone. Yes, those were real, slowly melting in the heat, releasing waves of sweet frankincense as it drips into her hair. She smells like a very expensive decision. Erotic etiquette here isn't about nudity for nudity's sake. It's about crafted seduction. A flash of thigh when adjusting a sandal. The weight of gold bracelets jingling during laughter. The way one bends to pick up a fig and stays down just long enough for someone to notice. This, you realize, is a culture where fashion doesn't hide the body it advertises intention. There's a man with a shaved chest and a lion's tail sash. You're not sure what message he's sending, but someone giggles behind you and whispers, he's doing that priest in training look. Apparently, that's a thing. According to Peter Webb's The Erotic Spirit Through History, fashion in ancient parties was less about trends and more about archetypes. You weren't just wearing a tunic, you were wearing a signal. Come closer. I'm wealthy. Or I smell like cinnamon and might ruin your marriage. These parties functioned like live-action hieroglyphs, and your clothing was part of the message. Or, in some cases, the warning. Nearby, someone spills date wine onto their lap and howls with laughter, drawing attention to the sudden, very specific wet spot. Their partner, a boy with kohl-rimmed eyes and a bored expression, blots it with a cloth that is definitely more lace than towel. The crowd responds with a practiced shrug. You overhear a servant mutter something about how at least he didn't try to flirt with the embalmer again. And you make a mental note to avoid the embalmer at all costs. Erotic etiquette also means knowing how to wear your scent. Smell is everything. You catch a whiff of cardamom as someone passes a dancer. Maybe, with bare feet and inked fingers. She's tied tiny bells around her ankles, and every step is a whisper of temptation. Another guest douses himself in blue lotus oil, a substance known to relax inhibitions and spark vivid dreams. Whether it's actual aphrodisiac or just well-marketed placebo, no one knows. Historians still argue whether blue lotus really had psychoactive effects or whether it was just ancient aromatherapy with a good PR team. Either way, it works. You're entranced. Someone leans toward you with a smile that smells like clove and licorice. They compliment your earrings bronze, modest, but apparently very symmetrical. You thank them. Your pulse decides now is a great time to perform interpretive dance. Erotic etiquette demands that you do not blush. You change the subject to sandals, always a safe choice. Then there are the wigs. Party wigs are a category unto themselves, often adorned with beads, occasionally with flowers, and once, during a particularly memorable festival, filled with bees. You overheard that story earlier from a baker who claimed his great-great-grandmother was the woman in question. You're still unsure if she survived. Your own wig is tame shoulder-length braids, and just a single strip of lapis lazuli woven near the temple. It itches, but it completes the look. The etiquette of erotic presentation wasn't just visual, it was tactile. People touched, brushed, leaned, and lingered, and the textures linen, gold, cooled skin from a splash of water became part of the language. A familiar figure returns the dancer from earlier. This time, she's swapped her belt for one with tiny glass amulets. She catches your gaze and doesn't look away. You lower yours politely, too polite. Maybe. She laughs and disappears into the crowd. The rules are fluid here. Direct eye contact can mean, come here, or nice try. It all depends on the angle, the setting, and sometimes how many cups deep everyone is. Sex in Egyptian culture wasn't shameful, but it wasn't crude either. It had a rhythm, a choreography. And at these parties, That choreography unfolded one gaze, one touch, one outfit at a time. There's a story from the Kama Sutra. Yes, that ancient Indian text made its way down the Red Sea that says, desire should be dressed like a lion in silk, quiet, deliberate, and always watching. You suspect that sentiment made its way here too, stitched into the hems of tunics and draped into the folds of every guest who lingers near the rose-scented fountains. You've become part of the tableau now. People nod at you in recognition. Your scent, your sandals, your slowly melting cone of perfume all mark you as a participant in this careful dance. You find a spot beneath a pomegranate tree. Soft soil underfoot, the branches heavy with fruit that glisten like candlelit promises. A woman sits beside you, her dress patterned with scarabs, her lips dyed red from hibiscus. She doesn't speak. Instead, she pulls out a hand mirror, polished bronze, perfectly oval, and checks her eyes. She passes it to you. You catch your reflection. Tired, slightly flushed, a bit drunk, but radiant. That's the etiquette. Look effortless, even when you're melting. Above you, the stars are slowly arriving. One by one, they settle into their usual places, unaware or uninterested in the small, scented dramas unfolding below. You yawn, and it tastes like sweet onion and wine. Someone offers you a date. You accept. It's warm, sticky, and probably been in their pocket for an hour. You eat it anyway. The party is humming now, in its gentle crescendo. Nothing frantic, nothing rushed, just heat, perfume, bare shoulders, and the sound of bees avoiding wigs. You find yourself swaying slightly, not to music, exactly, but to the rhythm of people passing, scents swirling, and conversations rising and falling like tidewater against palace walls. The courtyard smells increasingly like a dessert table that's been hugged by a spice market cinnamon, clove, cardamom, and the unmistakable musk of melted beeswax cones. You're getting used to this strange, ancient dance of innuendo, etiquette, and food that seems to flirt back when you bite it. Speaking of food, it's not just delicious here, it's dangerously suggestive. You pluck a fig from a platter held by a man wearing only a loincloth and several gold rings, and you notice how the fruit has been sliced open to resemble, well, let's just say someone in the kitchen had opinions about anatomy. You bite into it, and the syrup dribbles down your chin in what is either an accident or the party's most erotic moment depending on who's watching. A woman across the fountain raises her cup in your direction. You nod back. Now, officially, complicit. You dab at your face with a linen napkin that smells faintly of hibiscus and moral ambiguity. Erotic etiquette in ancient Egypt didn't stop at what you wore or how you looked. It extended to how you ate. There's a kind of language to the way someone breaks their bread here, delicately tearing it and offering half, versus shoving the whole thing into their mouth while staring down a passing priest. The former invitation. The latter, probably a statement, one that might get you politely asked to leave unless you're wealthy, in which case it's considered charming eccentricity. Figs, dates, honey cakes, everything seems to arrive pre-loaded with innuendo. The honey isn't just sticky, it's symbolic, sensual, slow, viscous. There's even a short poem etched on a ceramic cup near the food trays that reads, "Let me taste your sweetness as bees taste blossoms," which is either romantic or deeply alarming, depending on how you feel about bees. You see a man attempting to seduce a woman using only a bowl of almonds and a peach pit. It is not going well. The peach pit rolls away, rejected, He retrieves it with the solemn dignity of a scribe copying out tax codes. Over at the corner of the party, near a patch of date palms, there's a table entirely devoted to so-called love foods. These are ingredients thought to boost desire, or at least lubricate the idea of it. Mandrake root, blue lotus, wild lettuce, all crushed, soaked, powdered, or brewed into teas. A few cups are labeled with miniature hieroglyphs that translate loosely to, "Please wait 15 minutes before operating chariots." Whether these aphrodisiacs actually worked is still up for debate. Some scholars argue that the belief itself was enough to lower barriers placebo wrapped in tradition. Others point out that the quantities described in texts would probably have done nothing more than make your tongue numb and your dreams weird. Either way, you watch a scribe sip a cloudy blue liquid and immediately declare he feels the touch of Hathor upon his spine. He then falls asleep against a basket of onions, so maybe not. One detail sticks out tonight: the grapes. They're being offered not in bunches, but one at a time, by dancers in tight pleated skirts who lean in just far enough to make guests forget what century they're in. You receive your grape from a woman with henna-stained fingertips and a knowing smirk. She places it gently on your tongue and walks away before you can say anything. You don't chew it immediately. That would be rude. You let it sit there, the fruit cool and slightly bitter, as if to remind you that not all sweetness comes free. There's an art to this kind of interaction. Directness is frowned upon. The party's erotic atmosphere is built on subtext, on timing, on letting things simmer. You start to notice how often fingers brush against hands when wine is poured, how slowly people take bites when they're being watched, and how many people are, in fact, watching. Nearby, a storyteller begins reciting a tale half myth, half memoir about a party that took place during the reign of Hatshepsut. Supposedly, the queen herself attended in disguise and seduced 3 men using only eye contact and a handful of rose petals. The crowd listens with the reverence normally reserved for religious texts. Someone adds, sotto voce, that the 3rd man later became a priest just to atone for how good the rose petals smelled. True. Probably not. But like most Egyptian erotic lore, the truth is less important than the sensation it creates. That lingering thrill. That what if. A mouse seated beside you offers a basket of pomegranates and asks, with mock seriousness, "Shall we tempt fate together?" You decline gently, with a smile, but he's already moved on to someone else. The fruit remains, blood red and glistening. You take one and peel it slowly, letting each ruby seed fall into your lap like a countdown. Erotic etiquette doesn't rush. It paces itself, luxuriates in anticipation, and food, here, becomes both metaphor and means of delivery. There's a preserved fragment from a temple wall in Thebes that shows a noblewoman hand-feeding a scribe with what appears to be honeyed locusts. Interpretations vary. Some say it's a fertility symbol, others a depiction of seduction as service. Historians still argue whether it was meant as erotic art or just a particularly lavish lunch, but the smirk carved into her face suggests she knew exactly what she was doing. You lean back, your stomach full, your senses saturated, and yet there's something about the air that keeps you awake. The food isn't heavy. It's suggestive, stimulating. You feel oddly alert, like your body has decided this is the exact moment it needs to remember the sensation of your first crush brushing against you in a crowded hallway. The lights flicker low for a moment. An oil lamp sputters, recovered quickly by a servant, and in that instant of darkness, you hear a giggle, soft, mischievous, then a splash. Someone's fallen into the lily pool. There's applause. You don't even turn to look. These things happen. As you sip from your goblet once more, now filled with something citrusy and less mind-altering, you realize there's a subtle shift in energy. The party has moved from performative to playful. People are leaning closer, voices are lower, and the food is still the star. A scribe offers a slice of melon carved into the shape of a scarab. You accept. It tastes like secrets, and possibly mint. A final story begins, making the rounds quiet. Reverent, just loud enough to reach your ears. It's about a royal cook who seduced 3 high priests and escaped judgment by making the best honey cake in Upper Egypt. It ends with her becoming head of the temple kitchen and marrying a wine merchant. You're not sure what lesson you're supposed to take from that, but you nod anyway. It's probably about persistence. Or frosting. You stretch your legs. The stone beneath you warm from the crowd's body heat. Your hands are sticky with fig syrup. Your mind is hovering between history and dreamscape. And all around you, the erotic etiquette of the party continues coded into food. Gestures, glances, and gossip. Nothing vulgar, nothing overt. Just centuries of quiet seduction, unfolding bite by bite up. The air has thickened just a little now. Warm and weighty, like a velvet curtain drawn around your senses. You shift your seat on the woven mat beneath you. Now slick with the oil of spiced meats and someone's spilled perfume, and gaze lazily across the courtyard. There's a particular kind of hum at this hour of the night. A mix of drowsy laughter, whispered flirtations, the clink of ceramic cups, and the low, winding tones of a flute that seems to be flirting with everyone in the room simultaneously. In ancient Egyptian erotic etiquette, your body wasn't just something you dressed or fed, it was something you spoke with. A full, expressive sentence from the curve of your fingers to the angle of your gaze. And now, as the sky bruises into indigo and the torches glow soft orange, those unspoken sentences start flying like gossip across the cushions. You notice how often people meet eyes and then look away. Not because they're shy, but because they're polite. There's a choreography to desire here, and eye contact is the opening step. The longer you hold a gaze, the more serious the suggestion. A passing glance, harmless flirtation, a second look, mild interest, a stare that lingers just a few heartbeats too long. That's a proposition, and you'd better be ready to either return it or look away with a well-practiced smile of regret. The women at the party, especially those trained in the art of performance, are experts at this. Their eyes are rimmed in thick kohl, extending out to sharp, feline points that make even a glance across the courtyard feel like it might leave a scar. They don't just look at you. They draft miniature poems across your skin with their stares. You receive one such glance now, a casual assessment from a woman whose cheekbones should probably be worshipped, and you manage not to choke on your wine. Progress, according to Foucault's. The history of sexuality. Ancient Egyptians were deeply aware of the power of the gaze, especially in public and ritualized settings like banquets. To look was to name, to engage, to risk implication. This wasn't a culture of shame, but of calculated sensuality. The wrong look at the wrong moment could shift palace politics, fuel rivalries, or launch a discreet affair that lasted decades and never made it to the gossip tablets. Erotic etiquette demanded not only attention, but awareness. Who was watching, who was pretending not to, and who was using the crowd as cover to direct an entirely different kind of message. Once participant across the fountain is engaged in what might be the most polite seduction campaign in recorded history. Every time he refills a woman's drink, he murmurs a compliment, never the same one twice. Your laugh is more refreshing than the north wind. Your sandals remind me of a river goddess I once saw in a dream. The way you peel a fig is unsettling and beautiful. She smiles each time, demurring without denying him. You notice that they never touch, not once. Yet by the sixth refill, she's leaning closer, and his voice has dropped to a near whisper. You'd call it courtship, but that implies finality. This is something more ephemeral, like chasing perfume in a breeze. And it works. When they finally disappear behind a stone column, no one bats an eye. The etiquette of desire, followed to perfection. Not far from you, a noble woman fans herself with a palm leaf and glares at her husband, who is busy laughing far too loudly at a joke told by a woman half his age and several veils more transparent. You wonder how far is too far in terms of flirtation at these parties. There's a balance, clearly. Compliments acceptable, a shared dance even expected. Feeding each other honeyed dates while sitting closer than gods in a temple mural. Risky, especially with one's spouse watching. But no one intervenes. Erotic etiquette assumes adults know what they're doing, or at least what they think they're doing after 3 cups of blue lotus wine. Across the garden, 2 dancers begin a slow duet. They're dressed identically, in translucent skirts and golden anklets, their movements synchronized with uncanny precision. They never speak, but their bodies converse fluently, arching, turning, mimicking each other's breath. This isn't mere entertainment. It's a demonstration, an invitation, a reminder of what control looks like when wrapped in desire. The guests are entranced. You feel your own breathing slow to match their rhythm. Erotic etiquette values restraint. Yes, but it also deeply respects the art of the tease. And right now, the dancers are teaching a master class. There's a joke told at parties like this, recorded loosely in the notes of a traveling Babylonian merchant who once crashed a noble banquet. An Egyptian woman can undress you with a glance, but she'll only do it if you guess her favorite flower first. It's a line that sounds like nonsense until you're in the middle of a courtyard, surrounded by moonlight and sandalwood, trying desperately to remember whether she said lotus or poppy earlier. You're halfway through composing a witty pun involving lilies when you realize she's already left. Classic. You take a moment now to walk along the outer edge of the courtyard, pretending to admire the tapestries. Each one tells a story, some divine, some mundane, all of them suggestive. In one, a god seduces a goddess by taking the form of a falcon and dropping feathers onto her sleeping form. In another, 2 humans fall in love over a spilled amphora of wine, their clumsy courtship framed by a snickering monkey. Erotic symbolism, you realize, is not subtle in this culture. Even the shadows cast by torchlight seem to wink at you as you pass a low table filled with jewelry bracelets, pins, amulets meant to be borrowed for the evening. You pause to examine a particular item, a tiny mirror, no larger than your palm, with a handle shaped like Hathor's face. You pick it up and catch your reflection. Your cheeks are flushed. Your eyes are rimmed in smoke. You look, in this moment, like someone ancient, someone timeless, someone who belongs at a party like this. And so you return to your place among the cushions, armed now with the knowledge that your gaze carries weight. That how you look is often more powerful than what you say. Erotic etiquette demands attention to detail, to nuance, to the long, slow unfurling of interest over the course of hours. It's not about conquest. It's about choreography. And right now, you're dancing better than you ever have with your eyes. You barely notice the music shift at first. The rhythm becomes more deliberate. The instruments quieter, but deeper. Like the party is slowly turning inward. Gone are the fast, fluttering flutes from earlier in the evening now. It's the gentle thrum of hand drums and the slow, teasing notes of a harp that sounds like it's trying to seduce your spine. The lights are dimmer, too. Not in a dramatic way, but in that sleepy, flickering way that tells the body it's no longer the beginning of the night. It's the time when conversations drift from public gossip to private stories, when the space between people on the cushions gets a little smaller, and the questions get a little more personal. You watch as a group of dancers enters the courtyard. These aren't the usual professionals. These are temple-trained entertainers, priestesses of Hathor, perhaps, or performers from the House of Life, trained not just in movement, but in the exact psychological choreography of erotic suggestion. They don't just dance. They sculpt the air around them, their gestures pulling imaginary threads between guests. They wear anklets made of shell and copper, which click rhythmically as they sway, and with them, trailing casually behind like an afterthought, is a goose. A real goose. Fat, well-fed, clearly unimpressed by the proceedings, and definitely part of the act. You've heard rumors of this before, how dancers sometimes incorporated animals into their routines, not just for novelty, but to invoke certain symbolic meanings. The goose, sacred to several fertility goddesses, waddles across the stage area and honks at the wrong moment, derailing an otherwise sensuous moment. Everyone laughs. The tension breaks, then reforms stronger. Erotic etiquette, you're learning, includes humor. In fact, the ability to laugh during seduction to invite absurdity rather than resist it was a sign of confidence in ancient Egypt. It wasn't about perfection. It was about presence. The dance continues. One performer traces slow spirals in the air with her arms, mimicking the motion of perfume rising from warm skin. Another follows her with a fan, stirring the air as if to guide invisible scent trails toward the audience. It's abstract, poetic, strangely moving. Then one lifts a jug of water over her head and lets it trickle down her arm, creating a shimmering cascade that has no practical purpose other than to make every guest aware of how warm and dry their own skin feels. You shift uncomfortably. So do most others. The dancers smile. Mission accomplished. These temple dancers were often highly trained, sometimes even revered. While modern audiences might view them as entertainment, their roles straddled lines between art, religion, and erotic ritual. Peter Webb notes that many ancient cultures, including Egypt, blended sensuality and sacredness in ways that defied modern binaries. Pleasure wasn't sinful, it was divine. And these dancers, especially those affiliated with goddesses like Hathor or Bastet, weren't just performers, they were conduits. Their routines were sometimes used in rituals to stimulate fertility, inspire passion, or heal broken hearts. One scroll even suggests that a particularly skilled dancer was brought to Pharaoh's court during a drought, not for rain, but to restore the sweetness of living to a restless population. Tonight's performers are well aware of their power. They weave between the guests, never touching but coming close enough that you can smell the jasmine oil on their skin. One passes behind you, her shadow brushing your shoulders, and you resist the urge to turn around too quickly. Another pours a few drops of rose water into someone's goblet and whispers something in his ear that makes him drop his bread. The party doesn't pause, it adjusts, shifts, begins to swirl inward, and then the goose strikes again. This time, it waddles confidently toward the food table, hops onto a cushion, and honks directly into a basket of bread. The crowd erupts into muffled laughter. One of the dancers rushes to guide it back, offering an apologetic bow that only makes the moment funnier. A nobleman nearby raises his cup and says, "Even the goose understands desire tonight." You're not entirely sure what that means, but it feels profound in the moment. Maybe it's the wine. There's an older guest now wrinkled, draped in cobalt linen, eyes lined thick with black coal, telling a story about the most erotic party he ever attended. He speaks slowly, deliberately, savoring each word like a rare spice. It was, he says, during the reign of Thutmose III. The palace had flooded, accidentally or intentionally, and the entire celebration took place on floating platforms lit by oil lamps. Guests were ferried across the water by dancers. He claims that one woman never set foot on the floor all night, only moved from lap to lap, cushion to cushion, boat to boat, her perfume marking her path like breadcrumbs. She married a priest the next morning, he says. Or maybe a fisherman. I forget. You suspect the story has been generously edited over the years, but no one interrupts. In Erotic Etiquette, storytelling is half the seduction. Beside you, two guests are attempting their own version of this. One tells a tale about a stolen love spell written on palm fiber, discovered by accident in a granary, which allegedly caused the grain to mold until the couple reconciled. The other counters with a poem about a night beneath an almond tree, translated from a papyrus so fragile that it had to be read through water. Each story is a veiled confession, each laugh a test. You join in with your own anecdote, something harmless, funny, just enough to earn a nod and a shared pomegranate seed. You're in the rhythm now. The party has a current, and you're floating along it. Historians still argue whether these parties were truly spaces of liberation, or whether the erotic freedom came with hidden rules and consequences. Some suggest that while flirtation was encouraged, true intimacy had remained confined to social rank and political alliance. Others argue that these banquets were precisely the spaces where boundaries blurred, where class and gender temporarily softened in the haze of wine and incense. What's certain is that everyone here tonight is playing a role, some more deliberately than others. Even you. A servant arrives with a tray of small cakes sweetened with carob and drizzled with fig syrup. Each one is shaped like an animal. You choose the one that looks vaguely like a lion, though it might be a hedgehog. The symbolism eludes you, but it's delicious. Across the way, someone picks the goose. Naturally, the real goose seems flattered. The music slows again. A final dance begins this one solitary. A woman in silver linen spins slowly, eyes closed, arms outstretched. No fanfare, no goose, just her. The crowd watches, silent. There's something dreamlike about her movement, as if she's dancing with a memory only she can see. When she finishes, she opens her eyes and looks directly at you. Just once, just long enough, and then she's gone. The party has folded gently into a different rhythm now, less like a celebration and more like a shared secret. The air is thicker with the mingled smells of wine and musk and roasted lentils that have gone cold on untouched platters. The lamps burn lower, casting light that seems to tremble with every breeze, and the soft clinking of jewelry is now louder than the music. You're sitting against a cool limestone pillar, trying not to fall asleep, but your body is relaxing into the night, and your thoughts are pleasantly out of order. You glance around, and that's when you notice it, the sheer absurdity of what people are doing to get each other's attention. One man is balancing a pomegranate on his head while reciting something that sounds like romantic poetry, but might be tax code. A woman nearby is twisting strands of her hair into tiny spirals and blowing them like petals in the direction of a scribe who is pretending not to notice. And in the far corner, you swear someone is using a crocodile-shaped hand mirror to send flashes of light across the garden like some ancient version of Morse code. You blink slowly, absorbing it all. Welcome to the flirtation phase of the night, where subtlety is an art and ridiculousness is a love language. You pick up a small clay dish left near your cushion and notice a faint pink residue clinging to its edge. You sniff it. Roses, not the gentle modern kind, but something darker, earthier, mixed with oil. Ancient Egyptians didn't just wear perfume, they used it like armor, like poetry, like a challenge. You rub the oil onto your wrist without thinking, and it soaks into your skin like it's meant to be there. It smells like something both your grandmother and your future lover would approve of. The people around you smell like every flower that's ever dared to bloom near the Nile. The fragrances waft and cling, mixing with body heat and creating a kind of sensory haze that's as much communication as anything spoken aloud. This is a world where a person's scent could be their biography. One blend might signal youth and flirtation. Another, age and authority. There's even a rumor tonight about a man who wore an oil so powerful that 3 dancers mistook him for a high priest. He didn't correct them. There's a small gathering near the date trees, and you wander over, drawn by the soft laughter. A group of women is sharing beauty secrets, though beauty might be a generous term for what's being described. One is talking about exfoliating with crushed papyrus and salt. Another swears by a paste of fermented barley and goat milk, which she applies twice daily and only screams a little. But then, someone mentions the real secret to winning someone's attention, the crocodile dung trick. You blink. They nod. Yes, apparently. Mixing crocodile dung with fermented acacia sap and applying it to the inner thighs was believed to be both a contraceptive and an aphrodisiac. It's disgusting, it's legendary, and it's probably what that smell is. Erotic etiquette. Here includes the strange, the sacred, and the slightly stupid. You learn that applying blue paint to the soles of your feet is considered flirtatious, that burning onion peels can awaken the sleeping parts of the soul, which sounds like a euphemism if you've ever heard one. Someone claims that rubbing crushed mandrake root into your palms makes your touch irresistible. Another says that whispering a spell into someone's cup while touching the rim with your left ring finger guarantees they'll dream about you. You ask if it's been tested. Oh, absolutely, says the priestess. Twice. He married someone else both times. You sit back down, mind spinning with the sheer range of absurd romantic techniques. Yet underneath it all, you can't help but admire the effort. Every gesture here means something. Every scent, every smear of color, every choice of amulet or charm is a deliberate move in an elaborate dance that no one is rushing. That's the key. This isn't about speed. It's about savoring. The party has been going for hours, and no one's in a hurry. Even desire here is patient. A servant approaches, offering a small bowl of something thick and purple. You accept it, sniff it, and immediately regret the decision. It smells like fermented plums and wood smoke. The servant assures you it's an ancient love potion. You take a sip. It tastes like commitment, possibly lifelong. You smile politely and set it beside you, just in case you need to summon a spouse later. You notice someone slipping a folded piece of linen under another guest's cushion. No one says anything. No one has to. Messages at these events are often nonverbal. A flower placed near your left foot. An invitation. A bracelet removed and left on your wine jug memory. A line from a poem scratched into the wax of a lamp. A promise or a challenge. Erotic etiquette thrives on nuance. It's not just about attraction, it's about style. There's a story circulating now, told in quiet tones by a man with the voice of a storyteller and the eyes of someone who's definitely made up at least half his life. He tells of a court musician who seduced the daughter of a high priest using nothing but a lute, a well-placed sprig of mint, and a clay frog. Why the frog, someone asks. Symbolism, he replies gravely. Very powerful animal. Leaps into your heart. No one believes him, but everyone laughs. That's the point. Historians still debate how seriously to take these rituals. Some argue that these parties were highly orchestrated affairs, rich in symbolism and strict social codes. Others suggest they were messy, human, impulsive nights where people tried their best to follow the rules, but usually just ended up tipsy and vaguely enchanted. Both might be true. You certainly feel enchanted, and possibly a little tipsy. As the night deepens, you begin to sense that you're part of something bigger than just a feast. You're inside a cultural machine designed to create connection, mystery, and memory. Erotic etiquette isn't about seduction in the modern sense, it's about transformation. The way a person enters the party is rarely how they leave. Maybe it's the perfume, maybe it's the mandrake, maybe it's just being seen by firelight while everyone's guard is down. But something shifts. You feel it. So does everyone else. A woman sits beside you now, close but not touching. She asks your name, but not in a way that demands a true answer. You give her one anyway, half true and wrapped in humor. She laughs. Her eyes are lined in green coal that glitters like fish scales. She hands you a fig. You eat it without speaking. The fig is perfect soft, sweet, and a little decadent. You thank her with a look, and she returns one that tells you nothing and everything all at once. The lamps flicker. Someone yawns. A lute string breaks softly, like a sigh. The flicker of the oil lamps now dances across stone columns and golden cups, casting moving patterns on the wall that almost look like hieroglyphs in motion. It's getting late or early, depending on how you define time in a place where clocks are irrelevant and sensuality is currency. The music has slowed again, turning into more of a suggestion than a song, like a half-remembered melody from a dream you once had while napping under a sycamore. And just as your eyelids start to surrender, the tone of the party shifts yet again. Subtle, quiet, ceremonial. It's not louder, not wilder, but there's a kind of reverence now in the way people are sitting, speaking, sipping. You notice that some guests have begun placing small offerings in front of the statues that line the perimeter of the courtyard. A grape here, a smear of honey on a stone ledge there. A few have left notes, rolled scrolls of linen or papyrus tucked under the carved feet of their favorite deity. You realize you're now entering the divine phase of the evening. The gods have arrived not literally, but their presence is unmistakable. Erotic etiquette in ancient Egypt was never purely human. The lines between sacred and sensual weren't so much blurred as lovingly merged. The goddess Hathor, for instance, wasn't just a symbol of beauty and love, She was the celestial hostess of parties like this. Music, laughter, wine, desire. These were her domains. Her statue at the far end of the courtyard glows faintly in the firelight, serene and amused, holding a sistrum in one hand and watching over the debauchery with the calm acceptance of a mother who knows the kids will clean up in the morning. Nearby is Bastet, feline and sly, eyes painted in lapis blue, always poised as if she might leap from her pedestal and curl up beside the most interesting guest. Offerings have piled at her feet, bowls of milk, smoked fish, small bits of ivory jewelry. You get the feeling she's enjoying herself immensely. In this world, the presence of gods wasn't a buzzkill. It was an enhancement. They weren't scolding spectators, but participants in the mood, invoked with every drumbeat and swallow of wine. There's even a guest now, a man of indeterminate age, with a voice like honey and smoke, reciting verses in honor of Hathor that sound suspiciously like pickup lines. "Oh, Lady of the Sycamore, may your beauty fold around me like linen in the breeze." Is he flirting with the goddess or the woman seated beside her statue? Hard to say. Erotic etiquette allows room for ambiguity. Either way, the woman blushes. Or maybe it's just the wine. You remember a story from Eleanor Herman's Sex with Kings about a pharaoh who once declared that no banquet was complete without three things: food, wine, and the blessing of Hathor. One time, he apparently forgot to invoke her, and the feast ended in a minor palace fire, 2 divorces, and a 6-month curse of impotence. Whether that's myth or cautionary tale, it's clear that the divine mattered here. You're now watching a woman light a small cone of incense beneath the statue of Bes, the dwarf god known for protecting households, especially during childbirth, music, and drunken festivities. He's smiling his usual impish grin, and you can almost imagine him winking. The smoke curls upward, and the scent sweet, resinous, sharp fills the air around you, changing its flavor. You feel different, not lighter, exactly, but more open, like a door in your mind has been left ajar on purpose. Rituals like this weren't scheduled. They emerged organically. One guest begins a quiet chant. Others pick it up. Someone offers a bowl of blue lotus tea. A man nearby pours a few drops into his cupped hands and anoints the ears of his companion, whispering something that makes her burst into laughter. There's a kind of flirtation that only exists in the presence of gods bold, but respectful, as if the divine gives you permission to say the things your sober mind might smother. Someone touches your shoulder gently and places a pomegranate seed into your palm without a word. You look up, and they've already moved on, smiling to someone else. Was it romantic? Was it ritual? Historians still argue whether these divine elements at Egyptian feasts were truly religious experiences or simply cultural decorum. But it's impossible to ignore the effect. The blend of incense, dimmed light, rhythmic music, and meaningful glances creates something larger than the sum of its parts. People lower their voices, speak in softer tones. Even the laughter becomes gentler, warmer. One woman kneels in front of Hathor's statue and sings a few lines in a voice so pure it actually makes your skin prickle. The melody is unfamiliar, but the meaning is clear gratitude, desire, surrender. Erotic etiquette in these moments isn't just about what you do, but what you allow yourself to feel. You overhear a whispered argument, half real, half performative, about whether the wine tonight was blessed before being served. No wonder I kissed that priest's assistant. Someone mutters, That wasn't wine. That was divine sabotage. Another person chimes in. If you blame Hathor, at least leave her some fruit and apology. And then, laughter again. But also truth. The gods aren't blamed here. They're included, embraced, even seduced. The divine isn't a third wheel at these parties, it's the host. You watch as a small group begins what appears to be a game. They sit in a circle near the statue of Taweret, the protective goddess of fertility, and pass around a sealed jar. Whoever ends up holding it must whisper a confession to the goddess, then kiss the shoulder of the person seated to their left. It's unclear whether the confessions are real or invented, but the kisses definitely are. One man receives 4 in a row and starts fanning himself dramatically. Another laughs so hard during her turn that wine shoots out her nose. You silently thank the gods for seating arrangements that kept you far from the splash zone. A dancer approaches the god's table, now not with a performance, but with reverence. She removes her jewelry, lays it before Bastet, then begins a slow, circling movement, arms lifted, eyes closed. Her body tells a story, Yerth. Longing, joy, sleep. By the time she lowers her hands again, everyone nearby has gone quiet. The wind shifts slightly, and the incense smoke changes direction. Erotic etiquette in this space allows for these moments of stillness, where desire turns reflective and beauty is worshipped instead of consumed. You stretch your legs, your body warm, relaxed, humming. Someone places a lotus flower beside you. You don't look up. It's better not to. The gesture is enough. Your fingers close gently around the stem, and you let the petals brush your lip. You're no longer just a guest. You're part of the ritual. The night continues not toward climax, but toward communion. You're not sure when the wine changed flavor, only that it did. Subtly, sneakily. The drink has turned thicker, richer, like someone whispered a spell over the amphora while no one was looking. You take a sip and realize it's not just the wine that's changed, it's you. Your thoughts don't line up in the usual way. They meander, curl, double back. Words you normally find boring, like intoxication, reverence, arousal, now feel like warm stones in your mouth. Not heavy, not dangerous, just there, present, like everything else tonight. Which brings us to what this whole section has been patiently waiting for. The wine is officially doing the thing. The little transformation everyone anticipated, but no one talks about outright. You don't just drink here. You let the wine carry you into laughter, into honesty, into places where your mind doesn't usually linger in daylight. It's more than a beverage. It's a vehicle. And ancient Egyptians knew exactly what they were doing. They believed that to drink wine, especially in the presence of the gods, was to flirt with sacred chaos. The kind of chaos that doesn't tear things down but loosens them, so the truth can breathe. The drink in your hand now is red and dark, laced with herbs you can't name. You remember someone earlier saying it had mandrake in it, or possibly poppy syrup, or maybe both. The story kept changing depending on who told it. You take another sip. There's no bitterness, only warmth, followed by a strange tingle behind your ears. The woman beside you leans over and says, "If you feel the floor ripple, it's working." You look down. The floor looks fine, but her smile does not. Her smile is shimmering. Wine in ancient Egypt wasn't just consumed, it was curated. Some feasts involved over a dozen varieties, each aged differently, flavored with different infusions. Cinnamon, saffron, pine resin, even honey from flowers harvested on temple grounds. It wasn't about getting drunk. It was about getting loosened. Guests were expected to drink gradually, letting the wine ease them into the rhythm of the night. Too fast, and you'd embarrass yourself. Too slow, and you might miss the subtle invitations floating through the air like invisible notes. There's even a phrase etched onto a drinking cup that reads, "He who gulps misses the gaze." Poetic. Also a warning. Across the courtyard, a man in a feathered collar is holding forth about the mystical properties of red wine versus white wine. He claims that red connects you to Hathor, while white opens your heart to Thoth. Someone interrupts to say, Thoth doesn't care about wine. A third party declares that all wine is sacred if you spill it on your crush's lap. This turns into an impromptu ritual where everyone pours a few drops of their drink onto the ground in tribute. You consider joining, but your drink is too good to waste. You tip it toward the gods instead. Same idea. The thing is, erotic etiquette when wine is involved gets trickier. Your senses are heightened, but your sense of timing is relaxed. You see people leaning closer than before, whispering things that are only half meant, brushing hands under the pretense of passing grapes. One man is playing a game where he tries to guess someone's perfume blend by scent alone. He gets it wrong twice, then murmurs something about the scent of moonlight, and suddenly everyone's applauding. Whether he meant it or just ran out of real guesses, no one can tell. The point is, the wine is working. You remember reading that in some texts. Wine was referred to as the door to one's second tongue, which is either deeply romantic or the ancient Egyptian way of warning people not to overshare. But here's the truth. Oversharing is part of the night's charm. Someone across from you just confessed to once falling in love with a reed flute player who couldn't keep rhythm but had perfect teeth. Another admits they wrote a love spell using mashed garlic and onion skins, and that it worked. A third says nothing, but kisses the rim of their cup 3 times before drinking. Each story is a spell of its own. You sip and listen, not needing to speak. Historians still argue whether these wine rituals were truly spontaneous, or if guests were expected to participate in certain ways at certain times. Some say there were rules how many cups per hour, how to toast properly, who could refill whose drink. Others argue that beyond the basic etiquette of not vomiting on the temple cat statue, things were fluid, flexible, intuitive. The truth, as usual, probably lies somewhere in the middle. There's structure. Yes, but it's the kind that bends gracefully, like reeds in the Nile wind. You feel a hand on your shoulder, not grabbing, not lingering, just a touch, a reminder that you're here, in this body, in this moment, with other people who are also floating on this same soft current of taste and time. You turn, expecting to see someone you know, but it's a stranger with eyes like carved obsidian. They nod once, you nod back. Nothing else is needed. Erotic etiquette, under wine's influence, shifts from words to gestures, from planning to permission. You allow the moment to pass without clinging. That's the dance. In the center of the garden, a new ritual begins. Guests form a circle, each holding a small clay cup. The game is simple. Pass the cup to your right. Speak a wish to your left. It goes smoothly until someone wishes for the return of a lover who left with my best sandals. And suddenly, the whole party is howling. You participate without thinking. Your wish is quiet, private, untranslatable. The cup feels warm in your hands, like it's absorbed centuries of hope. There's music again, but not played. Hummed. A group of guests near the tapestry wall have begun humming in unison, a low, circular sound that seems to match your pulse. You close your eyes. The wine speaks in colors. The people around you blur slightly, their edges softened by torchlight and kindness. You remember how you felt earlier in the evening, alert, curious, slightly on guard. Now you're none of those things. You're open, not vulnerable, just less armored. You've been gently dismantled, and still, the etiquette holds. No one pushes. No one shouts. The party ebbs and flows like the Nile itself, creating little eddies of intimacy. You wander through one now, catching fragments of conversation that sound like poetry, even when they're probably just flirtatious nonsense. You have the hands of someone who carves dreams. Your laugh is sharper than obsidian. If I were a fig, I'd ripen in your shadow. You can't help but grin. You'd steal those lines if you weren't so drowsy. Your cup is empty. Again. You don't remember finishing it, but it's warm in your hand and smells faintly of spices and promises. You set it down gently, like a thank you. The world feels quieter now, even though the music plays on. You're not sure what hour it is, not that anyone here is counting. The moon has traveled far since you first entered this courtyard, and now it hangs like a polished silver plate, angled just enough to bathe everything in the kind of light that makes even chipped goblets look like royal treasure. You sit back, observing the guests with half-lidded eyes, and you notice something intriguing, the gentle tension in the air, the kind that hums under the laughter, under the toasts and soft gestures. It's not urgency, exactly. It's awareness. Desire doesn't roar here. It simmers. Everyone knows it's there, but everyone pretends it isn't, at least until the moment is right. That, in essence, is the erotic etiquette of jealousy. Not the theatrical kind, the stormy kind that ends with thrown cups and hissed curses, but the quieter, slipperier version that tiptoes in the shadows of a party like this. You see it now, a nobleman smiling too wide while watching his partner exchange poems with someone in priestly robes. A performer giggling as two admirers awkwardly compete to adjust her cushion. A guest who hasn't spoken in 20 minutes, just calmly watching. Their wine untouched. Everyone's playing the game. Everyone's pretending not to notice. It's a high-skill sport, this kind of jealousy. And in ancient Egypt, it was more than emotion, it was etiquette. You didn't interrupt someone else's flirtation unless you were ready to offer something better. You didn't stake a claim unless you were confident it would be welcomed. To act possessive in public was to admit weakness. But to navigate desire with grace while others also pursued the same prize that was admired. It showed control, patience, style. You watch a moment unfold near the pillar with the papyrus carving two guests, clearly drawn to each other, seated too close not to touch, but just far enough to keep things plausible. One of them laughs a little too hard at something said by a passing dancer. The other stiffens, just slightly. Not enough to make a scene, just enough to send a message. It's like a silent duel conducted with glances and posture. A third person arrives, casually, and sits between them. The triangle shifts. Everyone smiles. Nothing is said. And just like that, the dynamic resets. No tears, no slaps, just strategy. There's a story, likely embroidered over centuries, about Queen Tiye and her favorite courtier, some say, lover. Some say merely a close confidant who attended one of Akhenaten's famed moon festivals. It's said that when Tia noticed another noblewoman lavishing her attention on the courtier, she didn't confront or retreat. She simply began composing verses aloud, dedicated to no one in particular, in which she described a lover's scent, laughter, and the peculiar way they tilted their head while thinking. Every line was razor precise. Every guest knew who it was about. The noblewoman excused herself shortly afterward. Tia, she just kept sipping her wine. That's erotic etiquette. Assertive, not aggressive. Poetic, not possessive. Still, beneath all this civility, the feelings are real. One woman nearby is biting her lip a little too hard, while watching her companion lean too close to a poet. A man stares at his own feet, clearly regretting something he didn't say an hour ago. The emotions under the surface are intense, but so is the commitment to decorum. No one breaks the illusion. Jealousy. Here isn't a monster. It's a mirror, and how you respond reveals more about your own desires than anyone else's actions. You spot a quiet scene by the reflecting pool, a guest handing a scarf to another, folding it carefully over their wrist. A small gesture, loaded with history. Scarves, in Egyptian flirtation culture, were often tokens. A shared fabric might indicate a previous connection, or the hope of a future one. To offer it was bold. To accept it, bolder still. But to return it with a different knot than before. That's a whole conversation. Erotic etiquette loves subtext. It thrives on layered meaning. Because here, everything has a second meaning. The fruit you offer, the direction you lean, the phrase you choose when refusing wine, even the silence you allow after someone compliments your hair. That's not indecision. That's negotiation. Tonight's party has reached the point where emotions, long steeped in wine and laughter, begin to surface. Not dramatically, not crudely, but tenderly. You notice it in the way people linger before speaking, the way hands hover just a breath away before they're pulled back. One dancer places her head on a guest's shoulder, rests there for a heartbeat, then lifts it again as if nothing happened. No one comments. No one needs to. Foucault's work reminds us that power and desire are often entangled not in dominance, but in attention. Who notices whom? Who's allowed to speak? Who's allowed to be silent? At these gatherings, attention is currency, and the moment someone important stops looking at you, it stings more than any insult. That's when the subtle strategies begin. A louder laugh, a more dramatic toast, a conspicuous dance partner. All acts designed to reclaim the spotlight without seeming to demand it. You see it now. A woman who's been overlooked most of the evening is laughing too loudly at a joke that isn't funny. Her jewelry catches the light perfectly. She tilts her neck just so. It works. A guest nearby turns, smiles, and suddenly, her laughter sounds genuine. The balance is restored. No tears, just tactics, even jealousy. When refined like this, becomes erotic. It sharpens desire, turns casual attraction into something more focused. And the best guests know how to use it to stoke interest. Not resentment, to flirt with everyone just enough that no one feels ignored, but no one feels too secure. It's a balance, a dance of shadows, and you're learning the steps. A servant passes with a tray of lotus root sweets, offering small bites meant to cleanse the palate and cool the blood. You take one, and it melts on your tongue like a sigh. Someone sits beside you and doesn't speak. They don't have to. Their presence says what words can't I saw who you were watching. I noticed who watched you back. But I'm here now. Erotic etiquette thrives in these silences. the space between the stories, the air between two people who've almost said something important 3 times already. You close your eyes, not to sleep, but to feel the moment more clearly. Jealousy doesn't have to burn. Sometimes it warms. A breeze slips through the courtyard, stirring the lamps. The music changes again, just a little slower, just a little deeper. You open your eyes to find that the seating has shifted. Couples that weren't earlier now are. Trios have become duos. Someone is missing. Someone new has arrived. The party reshapes itself every few hours, like the Nile redistributing its silt. Nothing is permanent. Nothing is lost. Only rearranged. And here, jealousy isn't the end of the night. It's a part of it. A spice. A signal. An emotion that, when handled with grace, can be as intoxicating as the wine. It's during one of these lulls in the music, where the silence between harp notes grows just long enough to feel deliberate, that someone drops a name, low and casual, but just loud enough for the story to ripple through the party like a pebble in a reflecting pool. You don't catch the beginning, just the change in tone, the way nearby conversations suddenly quiet, how eyes begin to glance toward the corner of the courtyard where the older guests sit with a kind of impervious dignity. You follow the shift, your ears tuning in just in time to catch the phrase, "the night with the royal fan bearer." That's how these stories always start. Vague title, rumored scandal. Enough gaps that the audience has to fill them in with imagination, and they always do. Tonight's tale involves a courtier who served during the reign of Amenhotep III, a man whose palace parties were said to make even the gods blush. The fan bearer, officially a minor title. Someone responsible for providing shade and discretion, had apparently developed a rather enthusiastic loyalty to a certain high priest. Loyalty that, according to legend, revealed itself after 3 cups of date wine, a misinterpreted hymn, and an accidental collision behind a tapestry. The scandal wasn't the flirtation, of course. That was expected, tolerated, sometimes even encouraged. No, the scandal was in the location. See, erotic etiquette was not lawless. There were places where desires could be exchanged freely, and places where they absolutely couldn't. The antechamber of the royal shrine, especially while the sacred relics were being dusted, was firmly in the second category. The tale unspools slowly, fed by contributions from several guests who each remember the event slightly differently. In one version, the fan bearer dropped a bracelet, bent to retrieve it, and emerged 2 hours later with a new necklace and no explanation. In another, he and the priest were discovered tangled together in a curtain, mid-recitation of an erotic hymn to Hathor, claiming it was part of a ritual. The priests didn't buy it. The pharaoh did, which tells you a lot about priorities. You sip your drink and try not to laugh. The story is too good, equal parts absurd, romantic, and vaguely instructional. The etiquette lesson is clear timing matters. So does location. You can flirt across a plate of pickled radishes all night long, but don't do it near the sacred scarab altar unless you're prepared to apologize to an angry god and your supervisor. Still, there's something charming about these royal slip-ups. They remind everyone that even in a culture where eroticism was woven into everyday life, there were still lines, and crossing them could either end in exile or promotion, depending on who was watching. Someone else leans in to add their piece. They say that the fan bearer later wrote a set of poems about that night, disguised as lessons in temple ventilation. One of them included the line, "He lifted the curtain, and my heart, in equal measure." Cheeky. You appreciate it. Erotic etiquette in literature often used double meanings, and this party, as if in tribute, begins to do the same. Someone makes a toast to clean floors and dirty minds. Another offers a grape to a neighbor and says, "May your thoughts be as well draped as your tunic." The laughter is warm, knowing. Everyone's a little more relaxed now, lubricated by shared stories, blushing memories, and the relief of communal scandal. But not all royal missteps are playful. The woman beside you recounts a tale from a lesser-known princess who once tried to seduce a visiting foreign dignitary by quoting sacred poetry while bathing in a moonlit garden. The dignitary, unfamiliar with the cultural nuance, thought he was being cursed. He fled the palace on foot, naked, clutching only his diplomatic scrolls. The incident sparked minor political tensions and at least one bad poem. Historians still argue whether it was a misunderstanding or a case of very niche rejection. Either way, it reminds you that erotic etiquette isn't universal. What's romantic in Thebes might be terrifying in Babylon. You catch sight of a man now older, dignified, dressed simply but elegantly, watching the storytellers, with a half smile. You've heard he used to serve in the court kitchens before becoming one of the most sought-after poets in Memphis. It's said he once composed a love letter so beautiful that the recipient fainted. The letter is lost, but the swoon is documented. Someone gestures to him, inviting a story, and he obliges. He doesn't raise his voice. He barely moves, but every head turns. His story is about a party just like this one. Decades ago, a royal cousin, 2 dancers, a broken amphora, and a piece of jewelry that ended up exactly where it shouldn't have. No names, he insists. But the smiles around him suggest everyone already knows. What makes these tales so addictive isn't just the drama, it's the humanity. Behind the gilded walls and god statues, people made the same mistakes then as they do now, fell for the wrong person, sent ambiguous messages, assumed interest where there was only politeness, or missed interest altogether because they were staring at the wrong pair of eyes. Erotic etiquette tries to guide people away from disaster, but it can't prevent the heart from leaping into ridiculous situations. That's what makes it memorable. Nearby, someone attempts to recreate a particularly infamous dance from the reign of Seti I, involving silk ribbons, a bowl of figs, and 3 cushions stacked in what is generously described as a pyramid. It does not go well. The cushions collapse. The figs roll. Laughter erupts. But instead of shame, there's applause. A dancer helps the performer up and kisses his cheek. He bows, mock triumphant. The lesson is clear. Confidence can salvage anything. You notice, too, that each story shared tonight seems to unlock new layers of connection. The couple you saw earlier, the one navigating a triangle of attention, is now whispering side by side, their rivalry forgotten. Another guest, previously silent, now recounts a scandal involving a perfume merchant and a basket of smuggled love spells. Even the gods seem to listen. Someone places a rose on Hathor's altar and murmurs, "For discretion and drama." Perfect. Erotic etiquette, after all, doesn't exist to stifle behavior. It exists to refine it, to turn the inevitable messiness of human attraction into something graceful, memorable, fun. And if a few scandalous royal slip-ups serve as both entertainment and cautionary tales, all the better. The music shifts again, this time into a slower rhythm, as if giving everyone a chance to reflect. You stretch your legs, your mind full of laughter and glances, and wonder how many more stories you'll collect before the night ends. Hopefully, at least one worth whispering at the next party. You shift on your cushion, back against a painted column depicting lotus blossoms and birds mid-flight, and notice something you hadn't paid much attention to before. Not the guests, not the food, not even the music that has slowed to a lazy pulse, but the decorations, the walls, the pottery, the ceiling beams carved with scenes that, on closer inspection, seem a little too specific to be innocent. You stare at a vase nearby, the kind that's supposedly just there to hold wine, and see a scene painted in fine red ochre, a woman reclining on a chaise, a man behind her offering what appears to be an unusually long fig, while a cat looks on with a distinctly unimpressed expression. You blink. Is that what you think it is? You look again. Yes, it absolutely is. Erotic art, as it turns out, was everywhere in ancient Egypt, hidden in plain sight, stylized just enough to pass for allegory if someone uptight was watching, but explicit enough to draw smirks from the right kind of partygoer. Erotic etiquette here included not just the act of flirtation, but the shared understanding of its visual cues. A vase wasn't just a vase. A mural wasn't just a story. They were coded, layered, and intentionally ambiguous, letting each viewer see what they were brave enough to imagine. You wander slowly through the perimeter of the courtyard now, wine in hand, and begin to take in the full scope of the sensual decor. A painted folding screen shows a pair of lovers under a sycamore tree, limbs entwined in a way that clearly suggests more than just a shared nap. A statue of Bess, cheerful as always, leans forward just slightly too far, holding what could only be described as a celebratory rattle in the shape of, well, something festive. A ceramic lamp shaped like a reclining woman glows gently from within, the flame flickering through holes pierced in her jewelry, casting dancing patterns on the wall that look suspiciously like interlocked limbs. It's all so playful, so unapologetically suggestive, and yet nothing about it feels crude. That's the balance Egyptian erotic etiquette loved most: honesty without vulgarity, sensuality without shame. You remember something from Peter Webb's writing, that many of these artistic motifs weren't created to arouse in the modern sense, but to normalize, to embed eroticism in the fabric of life, not as something hidden or whispered, but as something woven into the aesthetic of the everyday. A bowl could be beautiful, and a pun. A curtain could flutter with more than just breeze. Even the palm fronds strung above you right now, meant to provide shade, are arranged in overlapping curves that echo the body not by accident, but by design. You realize you've been sitting beneath what might be the ancient version of a very tasteful anatomical joke for hours. In a corner of the garden sits a low table with engraved dice. Guests use them to play a storytelling game. Roll the dice. Land on an image fig, lotus, goose, sandal, and then create a romantic or erotic tale using that symbol. A woman nearby rolls fig, lotus, goose. She pauses, grins, and launches into a tale of mistaken identity involving a shy baker, a sacred pond, and a royal prank. Everyone applauds. She bows, then passes the dice. Erotic etiquette isn't just about intent, it's about imagination. Nearby, two young scribes examine a scroll half hidden in shadow. One reads aloud lines that at first seem devotional, but gradually reveal themselves to be a love poem of surprising physicality. It ends with, "May your shadow fall upon me like the cool roof at noon." You don't even need to ask whether that's literal or not. Someone hums their approval. Another guest begins sketching something onto a piece of linen using crushed pomegranate juice as ink. You glance at the drawing and realize it's not abstract. It's a stylized heart, shaped like a lotus, pierced not by an arrow, but by the elegant curve of a flute. You know exactly what it means. Erotic art, like the rest of the evening, walks the line between suggestion and celebration. Historians still debate the intent of some of the more explicit imagery found on Egyptian artifacts. Was it meant to entertain, to instruct, to amuse the afterlife? One preserved papyrus from Deir el-Medina, the so-called Turin Erotic. Papyrus contains images so delightfully bawdy and cartoonish that scholars argue whether it was serious erotica or ancient satire. Either way, it shows that desire and humor were not mutually exclusive in Egyptian culture. They could and did coexist, especially in spaces designed for intimacy and storytelling. And this party, you realize, is just one such canvas, constantly being redrawn. You take a seat on a low bench carved with swirling vines, only to discover that the vines twist themselves around images of lovers hidden in the leaves, tiny figures locked in embraces, some mid-kiss, others in positions that suggest the artist had quite the imagination. You laugh softly and take another sip. Erotic etiquette meant understanding that art was always part of the dance. The setting, the symbols, the lighting, all of it worked together to create an atmosphere where nothing needed to be said too loudly because the decor had already spoken. And if you missed the message, well, that was your own fault. There's even symbolism in the flowers used tonight. Lotus, of course, associated with rebirth and sensual awakening. Poppies for sleep and seduction. Pomegranate for fertility. The garlands strung around the dancer's ankles aren't just fragrant, they're flirtatious footnotes. One dancer wears a wreath of tiny blue cornflowers, rumored to invite mischief. You believe it. She's already convinced 3 guests to join her in a storytelling contest that involves balancing grapes on one's collarbone while reciting poetry. Erotic etiquette rewards those who pay attention to details, to layers, to the subtle cues that linger in lace, stone, and smoke. You remember, briefly, a detail from earlier. A guest had worn a brooch shaped like a monkey holding a fig. At the time, you thought nothing of it. But now, with wine softening your thoughts and the imagery around you nudging your mind into new shapes, it hits you. That wasn't a random ornament. It was a reference, a private joke, maybe a signal meant for someone else. You wonder if the message was received. You finish your drink and lean back again, staring at the stars between the palm fronds. The party, still alive around you, seems to pulse with a rhythm more ancient than drums. Everything is part of the mood, the design of the plates, the curve of the fountains. Even the firelight flickers in ways that cast inviting shadows. Never harsh, never cold. This is a place that was made to encourage desire without pressure, to create beauty without expectation, and the art, playful, provocative, poetic, guides you toward that balance without a single word. Somewhere behind you, laughter ripples like warm water, light and unforced, and it's in that familiar tone, half delighted, half dangerous, that tells you someone's made a bold move and gotten away with it. You turn just in time to see a courtesan in lapis blue linen placing a peeled fig into a guest's mouth, her eyes not leaving his for a single breath. The gesture is precise, practiced, and entirely within the rules. Erotic etiquette at its finest. She sits back, her earrings catching the firelight, and resumes her wine, as though she didn't just melt 3 hearts in a 5-meter radius. You've seen her before tonight, weaving through the gathering like perfume on silk, never lingering too long with any one person, always leaving just enough to wonder. That's no accident. Courtesans in ancient Egypt weren't just companions. They were artists, diplomats, the emotional engineers of evenings like this, and they had rules of their own. Not just the erotic etiquette that governed general party behavior, but an even sharper code, one that allowed them to traverse the strict lines of class, propriety, and expectation with precision. She passes near you now, the scent of cinnamon oil and something citrus trailing in her wake. There's power in how she moves. She doesn't ask permission to exist in the space. She makes the space adjust to her presence. Her belt is a slim cord of gold, her hair adorned with papyrus flowers. And when she speaks to a nearby guest, her voice has that particular tone that's both casual and calculated. You don't hear the words, but the body language tells you enough. She's neither asking for anything nor offering everything. She's making an impression, and everyone notices. According to Eleanor Herman, many high-ranking courtesans in history held more influence than some priests, not because they wielded armies or gold, but because they understood human desire better than anyone else. They knew what people craved, not just pleasure, but recognition. To be seen, truly and cleverly. In Egypt, this art form was codified subtle looks, careful words, and gestures designed to resonate on emotional frequencies most people didn't even realize they were broadcasting. And these women were masters of the channel. You see it again as she exchanges a string of riddles with a young man who clearly thinks he's being clever. She laughs at just the right moment, not too early, not too late, and then leans close enough to correct one of his lines in a whisper that makes him blush so hard he nearly drops his cup. She says nothing more. He's ruined for the rest of the evening. She continues onward, smiling at the torchlight like it told her a secret. Not all courtesans were women, of course. You spot a man across the garden dressed in deliberately mismatched fabrics, linen, layered in contrasting greens and purples, a sash of copper beads, a thin tattoo circling his wrist like a bracelet. He lounges next to a merchant's wife who appears to be quietly forgetting her husband's name. The man speaks slowly, gesturing with one hand, while his other remains still, like a dancer at rest. His charm isn't loud. It's surgical. He offers a peeled pomegranate seed. She accepts. Then he offers another, and another. A trail of fruit between them, like footsteps in a story that's only just begun. Erotic etiquette for courtesans was different than for guests. They didn't just follow the rules, they taught them. Their behavior guided the tone of the night, establishing the pace of flirtation, the depth of eye contact, even the timing of silences. They were the invisible architects of desire, and yet they operated within strict bounds. Accepting too much attention from one person risked offense to another. Showing favoritism without strategy could end in exile or worse, boredom. So they cultivated neutrality as an art form, giving just enough of themselves to every interaction to inspire longing, but never possession. Historians still argue whether courtesans held actual political sway in ancient Egypt, or if their influence was confined to rumor and poetry. But when you watch the way people respond to them tonight, how their presence ripples through the room, how even priests glance sideways as they pass, it's hard to imagine they were anything less than essential. Not just accessories to power, but wielders of it. One woman tonight wears an amulet shaped like a scarab, carved from deep green faïence. It sits just above her heart, dangling from a chain so fine it almost disappears. That's not decoration, it's a message. The scarab, symbol of renewal and transformation, doubles here as a quiet suggestion: come closer, and you might be changed. You wonder how many guests have accepted that offer, consciously or not. You suspect most don't realize it until it's far too late. Nearby, a short scene plays out like a parable. A young noble, clearly out of his depth, tries to impress a courtesan with boasts about his hunting skills. She listens politely, sips her wine, and then replies, "I once knew a man who hunted crocodiles. He died of boredom." The table erupts. He turns red, then grins, finally understanding he's been gently corrected. She pats his hand graciously, almost maternally, and then turns her attention to the next guest, who is wisely reciting a line of poetry rather than a kill count. These women and men don't dominate the party by force. They weave through it, adjusting the current like skilled rowers on a crowded Nile boat. Where they go, attention follows, conversations shift, tensions ease, flirtations flourish. They know when to stay and when to vanish. One moment they're beside you, the next they're laughing with someone else, and the memory of their voice lingers longer than the scent of their oil. There's a performance now, not a dance, not a song, just a story told by one of the courtesans. She stands at the edge of the pool, the moonlight catching her eyes as she speaks. Her voice is low, measured, like a lullaby woven from silk. The tale is about a woman who fell in love with a man who only existed in her dreams. Every night she searched for him in sleep, and every day she carried pieces of him, his imagined voice, the memory of his touch and her smile. One night, she prayed to Hathor to bring him to life. The goddess answered, but with a warning: if you meet him, he will vanish. If you never look, he will remain. The woman waited, listened, and never looked. She lived a long life, content and haunted. The story ends with the question: was that love or devotion? No one speaks for a moment after. Then someone raises a cup in toast, not to the gods, not to the guests, but to the ones who teach us to want without needing. Everyone drinks, including you. You return to your seat near the reflecting pool, cup refilled, limbs softened by the cumulative warmth of wine, stories, and glances that lingered a moment longer than strictly necessary. The water in the pool is perfectly still, catching the flickering glow of the torches, and you notice etched along the basin's inner curve more of those playful hieroglyphs, not the stiff, formal kind meant for tomb walls or decrees, but the casual, almost mischievous sort. A pair of geese nose to nose, a fig with oddly suggestive leaf placement, a scribe with a scroll that's, frankly, unscrolling itself with enthusiasm. You lean closer, unsure if you're imagining the suggestiveness or if the artist was just in a very specific mood that day. Then you remember where you are. It's not your imagination. Erotic etiquette didn't stop with the living. The Egyptians, ever meticulous in planning for the afterlife, made sure that the pleasures of the banquet, the sensual, the poetic, even the spicy, came with them. Look closely at enough tomb paintings, and you'll find not just scenes of offerings and tribute, but full-on feasts with music, dancing, and at least one couple pretending not to flirt directly under a statue of Osiris. Scholars sometimes refer to these scenes as idealized funerary banquets, but the subtext is clear: these weren't dry ceremonial gatherings. They were recreations of the kinds of evenings where joy was a sacred duty. The tomb wasn't just a resting place, It was a permanent VIP lounge where the wine never ran out. And you were forever reclining in your best linen, surrounded by good company and better stories. You think about the tomb of Nebamun, the Theban scribe whose frescoes show musicians and dancers mid-performance. Guests raising goblets in a rhythm that looks suspiciously like they're halfway through the best party of the season. Some of those women are shown with tattoos on their thighs and perfumed cones atop their wigs, the very same details you've seen throughout the night. These were not conservative afterlife vignettes. They were wish lists, evidence of how strongly Egyptians linked pleasure, memory, and eternity. Tonight's party reflects that same energy. There's a group seated on cushions not far from you, retelling tales they claim to have learned from a recently excavated sarcophagus. A very flirty one, the storyteller insists. The tale is about a noblewoman who instructed her burial attendants to include a mirror, a bottle of wine, and a tiny golden sculpture of her favorite lute player for entertainment in the field of reeds. Whether it's true or not doesn't seem to matter. Everyone listens, and by the end, someone's crying with laughter at the line. She told them to bury her on her good side, just in case he shows up. The afterlife was, in many ways, a continuation of the good life. Erotic etiquette extended into those imagined fields where the blessed dead would walk among perfumed trees, make love under the stars, and host parties much like this one. It wasn't frivolous. It was aspirational. To be remembered as someone who delighted in music, flirtation, and beauty that was legacy, that was spiritual insurance. One guest produces a small figurine from a pouch. A blue-glazed ushabti, the kind meant to do labor for the deceased in the afterlife. But this one has a cheeky smile and holds what can only be described as a wine jug in one hand and a flower in the other. I call him my eternal wingman, the guest says. You laugh, and so does everyone else. The figurine is passed around like a blessing. Someone suggests naming him Best Junior. It sticks. Historians still puzzle over just how literal these scenes and objects were meant to be. Was the party atmosphere in tombs meant as metaphor, a wish, a symbol of status? But when you're seated in a real-life echo of those painted walls, it feels obvious. They weren't symbolic. They were yearning, a declaration that joy, intimacy, and the delicious awkwardness of desire should not die with the body, that your best moments could be immortal. You shift, your fingertips tracing the rim of your cup, and think about the invitations left in tomb inscriptions, those strange, beautiful lines addressed not to gods, but to future readers. Come, speak my name. Pour me a drink. Remember me. Not just remembrance, but participation. Erotic etiquette extended beyond physical presence. It was about memory, legacy, the idea that your sensual self could outlive you in gesture and story. And here you are, at a party likely not too different from those once carved into limestone, doing exactly what they hoped you'd do. Smile, blush, drink, listen, wonder. There's a murmur now someone new has joined the gathering. Late, draped in gold and dark linen. Eyes lined in perfect symmetry. The crowd shifts subtly to make space. They carry themselves like someone used to being admired, but not surprised by it. They move with the confidence of someone whose portrait probably adorns a very expensive tomb wall. A dancer, a priest, a former lover of someone important doesn't matter. They're here, and the mood leans into them like a sunflower to the sun. They kneel near a torch, retrieve a scroll from within their robe, and read. It's a love poem. Maybe an old one, maybe their own. The cadence is slow, The metaphor's floral and just risque enough to draw gasps. Your breath is hibiscus in the wind. Your thigh, the edge of heaven's curtain. You lose track after that. The room exhales when they finish. Someone offers them wine. They refuse, smiling. "I'm already drunk," they say, and everyone groans, delighted, as they join the circle. Someone mutters that they must have been carved into someone's tomb. Someone else jokes. "Yeah, mine." The laughter continues, soft and rolling, but you notice something behind it: reverence. This guest, whoever they are, represents something larger than themselves. A continuation, a reminder that the stories aren't over, that the flirty murals in tombs weren't fantasies, they were blueprints, invitations. You glance again at the pool, its hieroglyphs catching just enough light to shimmer like language made of moonlight. The past and present blur so seamlessly tonight, it's hard to tell which direction you're facing. Time doesn't move forward here. It loops, echoes. A party in 1350 BCE and a party now might not look all that different. The wine, the eyes across the room, the shared joke over a fig. Those are timeless, and maybe that's the whole point, that when the body is gone and the carvings fade, someone will still remember the way your laughter sounded in the second hour of a long, perfect night. Maybe even carve it somewhere. A warm gust of night air drifts through the garden, ruffling the tapestries and sending the torchlight into a slow, hypnotic flicker that makes everything guests, goblets, dancers. Shadows blur just a little at the edges. The party has entered a kind of drowsy middle stretch, the part where the laughter grows lower, and voices settle into murmurs made not for crowds, but for individuals. You move slowly now, your limbs full of honey, trailing a hand across the low wall that separates the main courtyard from the smaller, shaded alcove behind the fountains. It's quieter here, softer, and just hidden enough that a few of the more seasoned guests have begun to gather for quieter flirtations or something else. Erotic etiquette, after all, doesn't happen only in the open air of the banquet. It thrives in these tucked-away spaces. The side rooms, the shaded steps, the corridors where a conversation can last longer than 3 sentences without interruption. Tonight, the alcove is occupied by 3 guests engaged in what might be the most flirtatious game of pass the fruit ever invented. It involves sliced pomegranate, a narrow wooden tray, and a rule that the fruit must be passed using only the back of your hands. No one explains the rule. It doesn't need to be explained. You watch, leaning against the carved stone, and notice the intimacy isn't in the game, it's in the rhythm, the way their eyes hold each other between turns, the careful way they tilt their wrists, the way they linger just a second too long before releasing the next piece. You could sit here all night just watching, and maybe you will. There's a reason these tucked-away spaces exist in Egyptian architecture, not just for privacy, but for emotional pacing. The feasts were designed with this kind of flow in mind. You begin in the wide courtyard, where spectacle rules food, music, laughter. You move into shadowed rooms as the night progresses, where scent, texture, and tone begin to matter more than appearance. It's in these side rooms that lovers confessed, that rivals formed pacts, that quiet seductions unfolded under the pretense of a shared cushion or a spilled drink. A servant passes through now, placing small pillows near the low wall. He nods at you, and in that gesture you catch a sliver of approval, as if you've lasted long enough into the party to be trusted with this part of the map. You settle into one of the cushions, now surrounded by a handful of guests who have clearly known each other longer than tonight. They speak in shorthand, in stories with missing endings, and jokes that begin with only a raised eyebrow. But they include you. One woman places a clay cup in your hand and says, "Try this. It's how my cousin fell in love with a fisherman and never forgave the sea." You don't know what it means. You drink it anyway. It tastes like herbs, and poetry. The conversation turns to a man who, it's said, once brought a basket of bread to a party like this, not to share, but to carve the name of his beloved into each piece. He handed them out, one by one, and waited to see who noticed. The punchline: his beloved was gluten intolerant. The laughter is soft but deep. Someone adds, "He married the baker instead." You think about that for a while. In the far corner of the alcove, you spot a familiar figure, the same woman who danced earlier, with the goose that upstaged her. Now she sits cross-legged, drawing tiny portraits on shards of leftover pottery. She hands one to a guest who immediately gasps and fans themselves. The shard, you see, has captured their profile perfectly, but with a sly twist, their eye is exaggerated. Their smile, just a little too knowing. It's more than flattery. It's truth with good lighting. Erotic etiquette in this space means knowing what version of yourself to present, and knowing that sometimes the version others see in you is more honest than the one you've rehearsed. A new guest arrives short, draped in plain linen, eyes the color of temple smoke. They carry nothing but a small bag and a story. They introduce themselves not with a name, but with a question. When did you first realize you were someone's favorite mistake? No one answers right away. Then, slowly, one by one, the answers begin. When he spelled my name wrong in a love spell, when she kissed me during a funeral, when I invited two lovers to the same wedding and danced with neither. The stories are quiet, intimate, delicious. The guest listens, smiling, then opens their bag and reveals a collection of stones, each one painted with a single hieroglyph. Everyone takes one. Yours is the symbol for breath. You stare at it, wondering who decided that's what you needed. Historians sometimes debate whether these quieter corners of Egyptian feasts were truly spaces of romantic freedom, or just less supervised locations for political maneuvering. But tonight, they feel sacred, safe, as if the rules of status and hierarchy have softened into something more egalitarian, if only for a few hours. You glance around and notice a high priest sharing grapes with a young harpist, a merchant arguing gently with a scribe over the definition of longing, and two former rivals now sharing the same scarf without speaking. It's peaceful, not passionless, just slower, softer. Erotic etiquette is about knowing when to pause, when to let silence fill the space between two people instead of rushing to fill it with cleverness. You shift again, your fingertips brushing the low stone ledge, and discover someone has carved something into the surface simple, half-worn, almost invisible. A fig, a single line of script beneath it. I tasted this, and it remembered me. You don't know who wrote it. You don't need to. It fits. The alcove grows quieter. Someone hums an old tune, something you half remember from earlier in the night, and it spreads slowly from guest to guest until the entire group is humming. Eyes closed, letting the sound carry them like a boat down a slow river. You hum too, not because you know the song, but because it's what comes next. A man nearby, his voice thick with sleep and sweetness, tells a final story about a party that took place entirely in silence. A wealthy widow hosted it to honor her late husband, but as the evening unfolded, No one spoke. Guests communicated only through touch, gesture, and shared glances. The evening ended with every guest writing a message in wine on papyrus. Messages that, when dried, left no visible ink. Invisible love letters. He says, only those who wrote them knew they existed. You ask if any were ever found. He smiles. Of course not. That's the point. You close your eyes. The hum fades. The cushions are warm. Around you. No one is trying to impress anyone. No one is trying to win. They're just being erotic etiquette. At this hour, becomes less about seduction and more about comfort, presence, trust, the flicker of a candle, the weight of a shared silence. You wake, but not fully. Just enough to adjust your position on the soft cushions. One arm flopped over your chest like a forgotten sash, the other resting in the shallow indent of a wine cup, long since emptied. The air is cooler now, and quieter too, not silent, but muffled, as though the party has curled inward like a cat around a lamp. There's music still, but it drifts from another room, soft as breath, played on a flute with no urgency. You blink slowly and realize where you are, one of the side chambers behind the courtyard, partially curtained off with linen dyed the color of dusk, and dimly lit by a half-melted oil lamp whose scent is more honey than fire. It's not a private room exactly, more like a pause between rooms, simple rooms. The kind of place that doesn't appear on a floor plan because it was never built to be named. These little rooms, these architectural secrets, existed in every elite Egyptian home designed for gatherings like this, not for illicit meetings, as people love to assume, but for intimacy of another kind. Conversation. Rest. Moments where the laughter fades and the body catches up with the soul. And sometimes, yes, moments where something more deliberate unfolds, but only if all involved know how to read the map of cues. Tonight, this room is occupied by you and two others. An older man asleep in a posture only a practiced drunk can manage, and a dancer whose eyes are closed, but whose foot still taps gently to the faint melody. You exhale and lean back, letting the shadows wrap around you. You've reached that part of the night where energy no longer comes from excitement, but from memory. The things already said, the glances already traded, the small risks already taken. Erotic etiquette at this stage is about aftermath, not the drama, but the descent. The quiet sense of something having passed through the room, leaving behind the scent of lotus and the memory of warmth. There's a low stone shelf against the far wall, with a jug of cool water and a clay dish of dates, each one wrapped in a tiny strip of linen as if dressed for a ceremony. You take one, unwrapping it like a gift, and bite into its sticky sweetness. The sugar hits your tongue like a forgotten kiss. This isn't indulgence anymore. It's care, recovery. The dancer opens one eye, smiles faintly, and gestures toward the water. You pour them a cup without speaking, hand steady despite your sleep-heavy limbs. They sip slowly, the cup balanced lightly in both hands like it might offer a prophecy. Then they close their eyes again. No words. None needed. Historians sometimes argue over what these side rooms were truly for. Theories abound: storage, secret council chambers, sanctuaries for spiritual cleansing. But the artifacts found in them often tell a different story. Scattered petals, used cups, half-finished love notes carved into the plaster with hairpins, a single earring beneath a pillow, Not signs of scandal, but traces of softness. You imagine an ancient guest much like yourself, resting here centuries ago, listening to the same sounds, quiet music, distant laughter, the soft, steady drip of water into a basin. They probably wondered if they would remember this moment later, or if it would dissolve like incense smoke. A woman enters the room, barefoot and humming, her arms filled with small pillows and a folded cloth embroidered with symbols that shimmer even in the low light. She glances around, sees that you're awake, and gives you the kind of nod that says, "Yes, this is the place." She lays down the pillows, tucks the cloth beneath the head of the snoring man, and gently places a sprig of mint near the dancer's shoulder. Then she leaves. No announcement, just grace. You turn slightly, now reclined in a posture approved by at least 4 generations of feastgoers. This room, you realize, isn't just for privacy. It's for transition, from public to personal, from ritual to rest. Erotic etiquette honors this too. Not every evening ends in dramatic embrace or whispered scandal. Sometimes it ends like this, half awake, fully content, surrounded by people who understand the unspoken contract of quiet companionship. In the dimness, someone else enters. You don't move. The rhythm of their steps is familiar. They settle on the far cushion without a word. Back to the wall, legs stretched out. Their presence is calm, not expectant. You glance sideways and recognize them, a poet from earlier in the evening, the one who toasted to invisible love letters. They look around the room as if checking for echoes, then close their eyes and say, "There's something holy about this hour." You murmur your agreement. They smile. You don't need to say anything more. This is what happens when desire is allowed to slow down, when there's no script to follow, no checklist to complete. Just the shared understanding that presence, real presence, is erotic in its own way. Erotic etiquette isn't about seduction in the narrow sense. It's about attention, offering it, receiving it, allowing yourself to be still while someone else exists near you. Unfiltered, unhurried. The dancer sighs and rolls onto their side. The poet hums the same tune they did earlier, and you realize the melody hasn't changed. It's been threading through the whole night, sometimes in the background, sometimes at the center. Like a heartbeat, you only notice once you've sat still long enough. You think of a passage from Foucault, paraphrased poorly in your wine-softened memory, that where power ends, intimacy begins, that there's a kind of truth only revealed in the absence of control. And here, now, in this small, sacred room, you feel it. Not vulnerability, not surrender, just rest. The kind you didn't know you needed until it arrived with a cup of water and a date wrapped like a prayer. Outside, the party still continues in fragments. You can hear it, the clink of dishes being cleared, a burst of laughter, the sound of sandals on stone. But it no longer pulls at you. You're not missing anything. You're exactly where the story wanted you to land. Erotic etiquette, in its most refined form, knows when to shift from pursuit to peace. Knows that the most seductive gesture at the end of a long night might be a quiet room, a borrowed pillow, and the knowledge that someone thought to leave you mint. You close your eyes now, not to sleep, but to be still. The music hums on, someone near you sighs, and the curtain stirs gently in the breeze, like a breath drawing inward, ready to begin again. The quiet settles over you like a second skin, and by now, it's hard to tell whether the party is still going or if the rhythm you hear the slow heartbeat of laughter. Sandal steps, Water pouring from one vessel to another is just memory echoing through the stone. You shift gently and stand, body stretched, joints warm and loose, and move through the sheer linen curtain that brushes your shoulders as if saying goodbye. Back into the garden now, into the softer version of the courtyard you left hours ago. The torches are lower, the shadows longer, and the laughter more hushed. But it's all still here, this entire glowing organism of night. Intimacy and performance just quieter. You make your way toward the central fountain, where someone has lit floating candles and dropped in sprigs of lavender and crushed hibiscus. It smells like a dream you once had, but forgot the moment you opened your eyes. A guest you haven't seen all evening steps beside you middle-aged, with lined hands and a robe so faintly perfumed it takes a moment to notice. They're holding something small, a leather pouch tied with red thread. Without ceremony, they open it and draw out an amulet no larger than your thumb, carved from pinkish sandstone. For longing, they say, offering it to you. You hesitate, but they don't push. It's not a gift. It's a placeholder. You take it. The stone is warm, as if it's already memorized your heartbeat. This is what happens in the later hours, when stories have been told, when the games have ended, when the dancing has slowed. Something shifts. What had been flirtation becomes ritual. What had been performance becomes intention. You are no longer in the party. You are in its marrow. Erotic etiquette at this stage pulls from an even older playbook, one bound not in linen or papyrus, but in symbols, amulets, spells, quiet magic passed down through families who learned long ago that desire is a wild thing, but love is a ritual. You walk now through the outer ring of the garden, where small fire bowls still smolder. Here, under the shade of sycamore trees, people leave offerings, not to statues, but to the idea of connection itself. A comb with a broken tooth, a scrap of fabric, a small bone carved with a single letter, and love spells. So many love spells, some whispered, some written in dark ink on long, curling strips of reed parchment, tucked under stones or slipped between flower petals. You lean close to one, and in the flicker of torchlight, you can just barely make out the words. Let him think of me when he sees water. Let her remember my hands in the shape of figs. Let them know I waited. You don't read the rest. It feels too personal, too private even now. Centuries later, ancient Egyptian love spells weren't always about domination or supernatural manipulation. More often, they were subtle enchantments, a wish wrapped in rhythm, a hope inked with pomegranate juice. They used language the way one uses scent carefully, lingering, designed to catch someone off guard and hold them there. Vatsyayana might have called it spiritual magnetism. The Egyptians simply called it intention, and tonight, you're surrounded by it. A woman kneels beneath a tree, her palms painted with ochre. She's rubbing them together, whispering over a sprig of mint and a coin that glints like moonlight. Someone approaches her and waits, silent. She nods. He kneels beside her. She places the coin on his forehead, and then both close their eyes. The moment lasts just long enough to become legend. Then they rise, say nothing, and part in opposite directions. You don't know what passed between them. No one asks. Beside the reflecting pool, a man arranges small pieces of clay in a pattern. At first it seems random circles, lines, spirals, but the longer you look, the more it begins to resemble a name. Not a full one, just the suggestion. He stares at it a long time, then scatters the pieces with a single breath. You recognize the gesture, a spell of forgetting. Some come here to fall in love. Some come to unmake it. There's a debate among historians. Of course, there is about whether Egyptian magic was literal or symbolic, whether the spells were believed to command gods or simply serve as metaphors for human longing. The truth, as always, is both. One guest's amulet is a joke, another's is an heirloom. One spell is a party game, another is someone's final wish before they boarded a funerary boat and left this world for the field of reeds. The line between sacred and playful is a braided cord, and every guest holds one end. A group sits beneath a canopy now, weaving bracelets from grass, petals, and bits of linen. You approach, and someone hands you a length of thread dyed with crushed berries. You don't ask what it means. You simply weave it into a loop, tighten it, and place it around your wrist. A woman across from you smiles and does the same. No vows, no promises. Just mutual recognition we were here, together, once. At the edge of the garden, you pass a low table holding bowls of ink and reed pens. Here, guests write the names of those they desire not to send, not to confess, but to acknowledge. You take a pen, dip it slowly, and write not a full name, but the sound of one. Just the beginning, enough to call the memory forward. You place it in the fire bowl and watch it curl into smoke. Erotic etiquette, at this hour, becomes something closer to prayer. The air is heavy with intention now. Not desperate, not frantic, just full, like everyone here is carrying a message in their chest. They may never say aloud. Some do. A young man tells a fig vendor, "Your laugh reminded me I have a soul." She replies, "I was hoping someone would notice." They walk off together. A dancer, quietly packing her things, brushes past a perfumer and slips something into their pocket. They look, smile, and don't follow her. Not yet. And you? What do you carry now? The amulet still in your hand. The echo of someone's glance. The taste of a date you didn't ask for, but accepted anyway. Erotic etiquette doesn't demand resolution. It rewards sincerity. If you leave here tonight with nothing more than the memory of how it felt to be seen, truly seen, then you've honored the ritual. You sit once more beneath a tree and close your eyes. Somewhere nearby, someone chants softly. A spell. A lullaby. The difference is irrelevant now. The flame you lit in someone's thoughts may flicker for days, or disappear with the wind. Either way, it existed. That is enough. You stay seated under the sycamore tree for longer than you mean to, tracing patterns in the sand with your fingers, not writing anything in particular, just shapes that feel like thoughts. It's quiet here, but not lonely. Across the garden, a few last pockets of conversation linger like candle flames refusing to go out. The music is nearly silent now, more of a memory humming in your ears than a tune carried on the wind. But in the stillness, your senses seem to sharpen. You notice the scrape of sandal soles on stone, the drip of water from a pitcher someone abandoned an hour ago, the rustle of linen against skin as a woman stretches her arms above her head and sighs. Everything is slower now. Every gesture seems to echo. You run your thumb along the amulet in your palm, the one passed to you earlier, and you wonder not for the first time how much of tonight will remain with you, how much was real and how much was dream. And then you spot something near the low edge of the courtyard wall, a papyrus scroll, carelessly rolled, tied with twine. No one's around. You reach for it, untie the knot, and unroll it slowly. The writing is casual, not formal large, looping hieroglyphs painted in dark ink, the kind made not for official decree, but for poetry. And what a poem it is. Your mouth is my first fruit, your gaze, my second son. When I walk past your house, even your doorframe whispers at me. It's not signed. You reread it anyway. Once, twice. Then, gently, you roll it back up, retie the twine, and place it in the crook of the tree behind you. Maybe someone else will find it. Maybe it will stay there until morning. Erotic etiquette doesn't require ownership of a moment. Sometimes it simply asks you to carry it forward. You rise. And as you move back toward the main courtyard, yes, still alive with its last embers, you begin to notice the writing all around you. Hieroglyphs you'd dismissed earlier as decoration now glow faintly under the oil lamps. Not sacred inscriptions, not warnings, just messages, love notes, jokes, tiny, carved fragments of flirtation left behind like echoes, one scratched into the rim of a wine basin. If your kiss is as sweet as your pour, I am already ruined. Another near the bench beside the fig platter. You passed me bread. I passed you my heart. You didn't notice either, and scrawled, carelessly but boldly, into the low arch of a column's base. She looked at me like I was new linen. There's even one scratched into the underside of a wooden platter, yes. You flip it over to check, that reads, "If you ever read this, meet me at the lotus pool." You look toward the lotus pool. It's empty, but your heart does a small, unnecessary somersault anyway. Erotic etiquette wasn't just about actions in the moment, it was about leaving traces. This was a culture where words mattered deeply. Not because they lasted forever, they rarely did, but because they captured truth in its most fleeting form. The Egyptians believed words had power, not only when spoken aloud, but when carved, inked, scratched, or murmured. To write someone's name was to protect them. To describe your desire was to conjure it into existence, and to leave a message behind, hidden in plain sight. That was a kind of seduction all its own. You begin to hunt for them now, walking slowly, reverently, like a reader in a secret library. You find more. On the base of a goblet, your hands are the shape of my rest. On a broken tile, tucked behind a cushion. If I vanish tonight, it's because you didn't look up. And this one, wrapped around the stem of a flower placed in someone's empty cup. You reminded me what it was to be looked at kindly. Each of these is anonymous. None demand response. They aren't pickup lines or pleas. They're offerings, gifts, and perhaps more than anything else tonight, they reveal the spirit of this world you've wandered into. Erotic etiquette here isn't just about flirtation. It's about observation, precision, the willingness to say the true thing, and then walk away before anyone can misunderstand it. A poet nearby notices you reading one of the messages. She smiles and gestures toward a basket at her feet, filled with blank ostraka small shards of pottery used for practice writing, discarded texts, or, in this case, love notes. She offers you one. You hesitate. What would you even write? Who would read it? Then you take the shard. She hands you a reed brush. You dip it in ink. The words come. Simple, spare. But enough, you found me when I wasn't looking. You place it on the edge of the basin where someone earlier wrote about being ruined by a kiss. Maybe they'll find it. Maybe no one will. But it's there now, and that's enough. Historians often treat hieroglyphs as sacred language, formal, regulated, structured. But there was another layer: graffiti. Love notes, casual scrawls that scholars dismiss, but lovers remember. Erotic language wasn't just preserved in papyrus scrolls and tomb murals. It was scratched into the backs of chairs, inked inside sandals, whispered across temple columns, in places where only the very bored or very devoted would ever think to look. This informal archive, the anonymous emotional record, is what survives in spirit even when the walls have crumbled. As the last notes of music flicker out, as the party winds down into the soft sounds of sleeping guests and servants quietly clearing platters, you walk once more past the pillars, running your fingers along the ridges of old stone, and you whisper something into the air. Not a name, not a wish, just a line from one of the notes you reminded me. That's all. Erotic etiquette, in the end, isn't about being remembered for your beauty, your wit, or even your touch. It's about being remembered for how you made someone feel. Light, seen, curious, warm. You leave your own message not carved, not inked, but placed. A date, split in half, on the edge of the wine jug. The unspoken implication whoever finds this and finishes it understands. The lamps are nearly out now, and the shadows no longer dance, they settle, pooling in corners and under tables, soaking into the linen folds of cushions that have cradled too many secrets to remain innocent. The night has folded itself in thirds, like an old love letter tucked in a jewelry box, and what remains are the final whispers. You make your way through the courtyard slowly, not because you're tired, though you are, but because you don't want to wake it the fragile stillness that has taken hold of the room like a spell. The musicians have stopped playing, their instruments resting where they were last dropped. Guests lie curled in graceful disarray, heads on shoulders, arms around amphorae, some still murmuring half-dreamed confessions. No one gets up. No one needs to. The etiquette of this hour is silence, or rather, the kind of silence that comes from having said everything you needed without using too many words. A woman you danced with earlier is asleep beneath a silk canopy, her sandal still dangling from one foot. Next to her, a small plate holds only the pit of a fig and a smudge of honey. You recognize the handwriting etched on the ceramic. When I bit into sweetness, it bit back. You think about leaving a note of your own. You don't. Some moments are best preserved exactly as they are unanswered, unshared, intact. You find yourself drawn toward the inner courtyard, a space you hadn't noticed earlier. It's smaller than the others, quieter still, with no torches at all, just moonlight, and the glow from one last oil lamp that someone must have forgotten to snuff. The pool here is still, rimmed in polished alabaster that catches the light like spilled silver. Floating on its surface are lotus blossoms, arranged deliberately in a spiral. You realize someone did this recently. The petals are fresh, the scent alive, and it feels less like decoration and more like a ritual. Erotic etiquette, at this hour, turns toward reflection, not the flirty kind that glances in mirrors and rearranges a curl, but the deep kind, the kind that stares into water and asks quietly, "Who did I become tonight?" You kneel by the edge, not to pray, not even to think, but simply to look. Your reflection stares back, softened by ripples. You look different, looser, like a version of yourself who belongs to stories now, not to tasks or schedules. There's coal smudged at your temple, a drop of wine at your collar, and something in your eyes that wasn't there before. Maybe recognition of who you were when you arrived, of who you might be when you leave. The Egyptians believed the heart was the seat of thought, memory, and emotion. In the afterlife, it would be weighed against a feather to determine your fate. But what about the heart you offer someone else, just for a night? What about the version of yourself you give freely, expecting nothing? To a stranger, over figs and half-truths, where is that weighed? Perhaps here, in this courtyard, in this breath, in the quiet decision not to say goodbye, but simply to go. There's a woman now, dressed in plain linen, walking among the remaining guests. She carries a tray of cooled cloths and cups of water tinged with lemon and myrrh. She moves slowly, like she's done this 1,000 times, stopping to place a cloth on someone's forehead, to tuck a cushion under a sleeping guest's knees, to refill a cup without waking its owner. You watch her, captivated. She's not a servant in the traditional sense. There's reverence in how she moves, as if tending not just to bodies, but to something larger, a ritual closer, a priestess of aftermath. When she reaches you, she offers a cloth. You accept. She nods once and presses a cup into your hand. The water is cool, the flavor faint and earthy. It wakes you just enough to feel the full weight of your limbs. "This is the hour of silk," she says, almost too softly to hear, when memory wraps around you and won't let go. Then she moves on, leaving no footprint. You rise slowly, stretching again, and begin one last walk around the perimeter of the space. This time, you're not searching for messages or artifacts or hidden games. You're just saying farewell to the space, to the feeling. You pass the table where someone once poured wine with too much confidence. You pass the curtain where a fig joke landed better than expected. You pass the bench where a stranger said your breath smelled like moonlit reeds. You remember all of it, not in detail, but in mood, in the softened haze of sensory echo. There's one last guest still awake, an older man sitting cross-legged near the embers of what was once the main hearth. He holds a scroll but doesn't read it. He's watching the smoke rise and disappear into the night. You sit beside him without asking. He doesn't look at you, but after a long moment, he speaks. "People think erotic stories end with passion," he says. They don't. They end with presence, with someone staying beside you when there's no more to perform. You nod. He nods. That's all. Historians still debate the role of eroticism in Egyptian philosophy. Was it spiritual or just social? Did it connect them to the divine, or simply to each other? But sitting here, under the weight of a night that has whispered more truth than 100 sermons, it feels obvious. It wasn't either. It was both. The erotic was the lens they used to see the world, not just the sensual parts, but the beautiful, the fleeting, the strange, the meaningful. A lens that turned fruit into metaphor, glance into covenant, silence into comfort. A wind stirs, brushing through the courtyard like a sigh, lifting petals into motion. Somewhere, a door creaks. Somewhere, a lamp dies. And it's time. Not because anyone told you, but because the story has finished telling itself. You stand, stretch again. The man by the fire doesn't look up. He doesn't need to. You find your sandals where you left them, tucked beneath a low stool. They're warm, and the leather wraps easily around your feet. One last glance around the room. A handful of guests still asleep, a few already slipping out into the early morning. And you, stepping quietly through the garden gate, into the hush of pre-dawn. No one says goodbye. That's not how this ends. Erotic etiquette doesn't conclude with farewells. It concludes with memory, with a half smile you'll wear tomorrow without knowing why, with a scent you'll swear you dreamed, with a word, written somewhere, that once meant everything. The sky is bleeding softly into gray as you step beyond the walls of the estate. The night's perfumes slowly giving way to the fresh, cool breath of approaching dawn. The air carries a new kind of silence now, not the hush of secrecy or seduction, but the wide, expectant calm of something completed. Behind you, the house still glows faintly, a final pulse of golden warmth in the distance, like a lantern on a faraway boat that once carried you across a strange, sensual river and deposited you gently on the opposite bank. Changed. You walk slowly, the soles of your sandals sticky with the dust of crushed figs and wine spills, your limbs humming with that specific tiredness that only comes after a long, meaningful night spent seeing and being seen. Erotic Etiquette has fulfilled its last task, not only to invite joy, but to offer you back to yourself, whole and intact, soft where you were brittle, lighter where you once held too tightly. Along the road, vendors are beginning to stir. A potter yawns beside his cart, arranging small vessels like offerings to the sun. A baker emerges from a shadowed doorway with trays of dough that smell like promise. You nod to them. They nod back. You wonder if they too have returned from such a party, or if your sleep-rumpled hair and lotus-stained fingers mark you as someone who's lived another kind of night altogether. You pass a small water basin, meant for ritual cleansing before entering temples. You dip your hands in without thinking. The water is cold, shockingly so. It startles the last of the dream from your skin, but it doesn't erase it. Nothing could. You dry your hands on your robe and continue. As you walk, memories begin to reorder themselves. Not in chronology, nothing happened in strict order last night, but in feeling. You recall the flute melody that followed you through multiple rooms, the way figs tasted better after someone else bit first, the feel of a linen curtain brushing your bare arm like a whispered dare. You remember the amulet in your pocket as still there, the stone for longing. You don't take it out. It feels safer tucked away, like a secret you're not ready to say aloud. There's a market up ahead, just beginning to murmur with life. A woman sells herbs and oils from small, folded cloths laid out in neat rows. You pause, drawn by the smell of blue lotus and something darker, muskier. She doesn't speak, but her eyes crinkle with recognition. Not of you, specifically, but of your condition. She sees it all the time. You glance at a tiny flask, shaped like a pomegranate, and she smiles. For remembering, she says. You nod, hand her a coin, and take the bottle. You won't need it immediately, but you'll want it later. When the haze fades and the dream feels too fragile to trust. Historians often focus on the grand architecture of Egyptian love marriages, alliances, lineages. But just as often, the fragments that survive are these perfume recipes, poetry fragments, flirtatious letters from one scribe to another. Eroticism was never just about physicality. It was an archive of the senses, a memory passed down, not in text, but in touch. That's what the party was. That's what it still is. Walking beside you, invisible but present, like the scent of last night's oil on your wrist. You cross a narrow bridge over a stream, watching the water carry flower petals and broken reeds downstream. The sun breaks the horizon now, warm and low, painting your path in pale gold. And still, the night lingers. You think of the people you met. The woman who spoke only in riddles, the man who drew names on fruit, the dancer who never stopped moving even when she slept. What were they really? Courtesans, priests, artists, ghosts? Maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe the etiquette of nights like these is less about identity and more about permission to be something else for a while. Something truer, something finer. To set down your regular shape and try on another, without consequence, without labels. You pass a wall etched with graffiti, not unlike the scribbles in the garden. He touched my hand, and I remembered my name. You touch the stone gently. You understand now what it means. Further down the road, the temple bells begin to chime. Morning rituals are underway. Offerings to the gods, libations, chants. The transition from darkness to day, and you, somewhere between. You pause one last time before the path turns, before the house disappears entirely behind the ridge. You look back, not to see it, but to feel the echo of its warmth, the laughter, the silk, the strange magic of being wanted and wanting in return, without fear. Erotic etiquette, in its purest form, is not about seduction. It's about being welcome in someone's gaze. And you were. Fully. A priest passes you on the road, offering a half nod. He carries a scroll and a bundle of fresh-cut lilies. You wonder if even he has stories like yours, tucked away beneath his robes. Everyone does. Probably. You keep walking. You're almost home. The sky is now a brilliant pink, washing the sand in soft tones. You think about writing some of it down later. Not the whole story. Just parts. A phrase, a fig recipe, a scent, enough to call it back when you need it. Because if you learned anything from last night, it's this. Memory is the true medium of erotic art. The look that lingers. The line you overheard and haven't stopped thinking about. The touch you barely noticed until it was gone. That's the currency. That's the ritual. That's the legacy. You reach your door. You're home. Familiar smells. Familiar sounds. You cross the threshold slowly. The light inside is cooler, simpler. But you are not. You are warmer, altered, wrapped in something invisible. The house has not changed, but you have. And you know without needing to check that somewhere on your wrist, or in your pocket, or beneath your skin, is the proof that it happened. That you were there, that you learned a different language, one that doesn't need translation. Just remembering. You step quietly into your home, letting the door rest against the frame rather than latch, as if closing it too firmly might end something you aren't ready to let go of yet. The room is exactly as you left it, a bowl of half-eaten lentils on the low table. The lamp wick curled and dry, your sandals twin marks in the dust of the entryway. But now the space feels somehow airier, more fragile, like the shell left behind by a night bird. You cross the threshold not as the person who left last evening, dressed in quiet expectation, but as someone gently reshaped by everything that passed between those golden-lit rooms and this silent one. The stillness doesn't startle you. It greets you like a loyal companion. You set the amulet on the edge of your sleeping mat, not as an offering, not even for safekeeping, just so you can see it in the first light. It catches the pale dawn and throws a faint glow against the wall, like a second sun. You remove your robe slowly, folding it over a chair, noticing as you do the scent of last night clinging to the fabric oil of marjoram. Faint smoke. Another person's laughter. You don't try to preserve it. It'll fade soon. Everything sacred does. The cool floor beneath your feet grounds you as you kneel beside the mat. stretching once before lying down. You don't close your eyes. Not yet. You stare at the ceiling. The same ceiling you've looked at 100 times. Now different because of what you carry inside you. Erotic etiquette doesn't end when the party does. It lingers. Reshapes how you inhabit your own body, how you remember your own voice. You feel it even now, the brush of someone's fingers on your elbow, the way a phrase curled into your ear like breath, the way someone saw you, really saw you, and offered nothing but that gaze in return. You did not win or lose. You simply were. You think back to the night as if it were a myth passed down through whispered songs. The goddess who danced until the fruit pit cracked beneath her heel. The scribe who carved love poems onto shards too broken to repair. The guest who said nothing all night until one perfect sentence at the end made you question your own name. They may not remember you. You may never see them again. But it doesn't matter. You were part of the story. A note in the chord. And in that garden, under that moon, someone matched your frequency. That's rare. That's more than enough. Historians might one day argue over what actually happened at these parties. What was real? What was ceremonial? What was invented by later generations who wanted to romanticize the decadence of the past? But those scholars, for all their scrolls and certainty, won't know the half of it. Because what they can't carbon date is this: the precise moment when your breath caught because someone across the room recited a line that described your own dream from the night before. The moment when your hands brushed beneath the pomegranate tree, and no one said anything. And yet, everything was said. These moments were not documented, but they were lived. And that is history too. You roll onto your side, drawing the linen sheet over your hip, and feel the press of the small perfume flask in your robe pocket. You'd forgotten it. The one you bought in the market, for remembering. You don't open it yet. You don't need to. The memories are still fresh, still glistening like dew on a morning fig. But you keep it close, because you know that when the weight of everyday life begins to flatten these memories into stories, the scent will lift them again, for a moment, into something round and full. Something felt. The sun outside begins to rise in earnest, sending sharp angles of light through the cracks in your shutters. You close your eyes, not to sleep, though that will come, but to let the night replay one more time behind your lids. You begin to catalog the textures, the lip of the wine cup, the stone coolness of the bench, the warmth of someone's palm left briefly on your back as they passed, the softness of a fig pressed into your fingers, skin yielding with ripe urgency. You don't order them. You don't analyze. You just float. There was no climax, no dramatic finale. That was the point. Erotic etiquette, when done properly, never overplays its hand. It slips away just when you start to wonder if it was ever really there. That is its elegance. That is its grace. You feel gratitude not for a specific kiss or touch or glance, but for the architecture of the night itself. The way it was built like a temple, with chambers of joy and sanctuaries of silence, with offerings not of gold or incense, but of attention, humor, gesture. You think about how the ancient Egyptians understood the afterlife not as a place of judgment, but as a continuation of beauty, that the dead could still feast, flirt, recline with friends beneath fruiting trees. That desire did not end with death, but became more refined, more symbolic, more deliberate. Last night felt like that, a rehearsal for eternity, a glimpse of a world where everyone is allowed to want and to be wanted, without fear or shame. And now, as your breath slows and the linen warms beneath your body, you make a quiet vow to carry that lesson forward, to speak plainly, to notice beauty, to leave messages in strange places, to write names in your heart even when you know they may fade, to show up fully, not because you're owed anything in return, but because presence is the most erotic gift of all. You feel your muscles loosen, your pulse slow. The weight of the night becomes the softness of morning. You think one last time about that woman who told you this was the hour of silk. She was right. Everything now feels wrapped in it, your thoughts, your limbs, your memory. The house is silent. The world is turning. And you, finally, sleep. Now, as you drift in that soft space between waking and sleep, let everything you've seen melt gently into shadow. The garden lights have long since flickered out. The music has stilled. The last scent of wine and fig has been carried off by the morning breeze, and even the whispers of the guests have faded into silence. All that remains is the trace of touch, of glance, of presence. Let the night fold over you like fine linen, cool, smooth, and gently fragrant with stories. You don't need to remember every detail, not the names, not the faces, not even the path through the house. You only need the feeling that for one long, beautiful night, you existed in a world that spoke the language of desire without pressure, of closeness without consequence. You were seen, you were safe, and the memory of that will linger long after dreams take over. Let your body soften now. Let your shoulders ease. Let your breath slow as if it, too, is remembering how to rest. The party is over, but it was real, and you were part of it. Every fig, every smile, every unspoken promise left behind in a cup or carved into a wall. It all happened. You don't need proof, just peace. So settle into the quiet. Let the silk of night wrap around your thoughts. Let the weight of the world fall away. And as you drift deeper, as the stillness grows, know that somewhere in a story far from here, a fig waits to be shared, a poem waits to be whispered, and someone remembers your name. Good night. Sweet dreams. End of script. Sweet dreams.